see you guys in the dark.
Ethan Fester was a heartthrob. He stood at 6'1", had brownish red hair, and a smile that lit up every room he entered. Inheriting his mom's blue eyes, Ethan also sported a set of dimples girls went crazy over. Everybody loved Ethan, and girls crushed madly over him. Funny thing about it all was Ethan never did anything to receive all of this attention. People just gave it to him. His parents dotted over him. They bought him things and talked about him to their friends. Every time they saw him, they couldn't help but smile. Ethan was their only child. As you can imagine, he was very precious to them. He made good grades in school, came home on time from school every day, and did all of his chores whenever asked. He went grocery shopping with his mom and spent evenings talking to his dad as they watched TV. Ethan had social media, but he didn't spend hours on the computer like his friends did. He had a lot of followers and friends connected to his online accounts, even people he didn't know. He was just a sweet and caring guy that way. His parents bought him a convertible when he turned 16, and the whole school went crazy over it. Nobody had a car where the top just folded back. Girls left and right were hitting on him, up for rides. The girls wanted him to take them to the beach on weekends and go drinking. He obliged, but never hung around for long, and he never drank himself. He knew his parents would be disappointed in him. Everybody respected Ethan, even though the whole school loved him. None of the girls ever had the courage to ask him out on a date. None of the guys had the courage to hit him up for quality time alone, as several wanted to get to know him better and to develop a closer brotherly bond. In Ethan's own way, he was aloof to most people. It was his benefit. He never got caught up in the misfires of youth, like sex or drinking. It wasn't a huge thing where he went to school for students to rebel, but everyone, or nearly everyone, made at least one mistake and did something out of character, all except for one guy. Sawyer Lancelot was a very quiet guy with no friends. He didn't do anything to be disliked, but he never did anything nor went out of his way for anyone either. He'd be very blunt about things and didn't have a problem telling people how he felt, even if it meant hurting their feelings. Sawyer wasn't completely Caucasian. His mom was full-blooded Cherokee Indian, and his dad was full Caucasian. Sawyer had a dark tan and black hair, with dark brown eyes. He carried around a very stern demeanor. He had a stunning smile, but he never used it. He made good grades and did everything he was told by both teachers and his parents. He even won a lot of awards students win when they exceed in academics. He was one of the top students in his class. He worked on the evenings and wrote plays for drama club, played a lot of video games, and listened to a lot of music in his spare time. He and Ethan crossed paths only a handful of times, mainly after school events where the top students gathered for instructions or to be rewarded for something they did. Cross paths again soon. This time, though, it would become a turning point for both of their lives. Ethan was dribbling a basketball in his hand in the middle of his driveway with several guys from school when a flashy car sped by and then stopped. Suddenly, there were 3 girls from the nearby university. The driver pressed her horn and made a loud noise, indicating that she thought Ethan was hot. All 5 guys looked up and at the car. Then everybody looked at Ethan. "Dude," one of the guys barked out, "you even have ladies over from the college getting at you." The other guy smiled and looked back at the girl. She was very sexy. She looked older, too. Ethan looked very interested, but inside, he hoped that she'd leave at any moment. He could tell she was older and more refined. Ethan himself was only 18 and not yet finished with school. He wasn't ready for a hot, flashy fling. Luckily, the girls didn't stay. They all smiled, waved, and then the driver of the car skidded away, thoroughly pleased by the attention and the reaction Ethan had spared. The whole afternoon was full of speculation between the guys about the girls from college and how they wouldn't wait to attend next year. Ethan smiled and laughed at all the innuendos and corny remarks. He himself didn't think he was attending the local college. He had his eyes set on a prestigious college worlds away from him and his friends. Was waiting on an acceptance letter from Duke University. The restaurant's 2 blocks away from Ethan's house called the Varsity. It served hamburgers and hot dogs. Every student from his school has been there at least one time or another. On the day, those girls from the university drove down Ethan's street. Later, Ethan had also decided to eat at the Varsity with his friends. It had been later that episode with the girls. Ethan was just about to bite into his hamburger when he saw one of his fellow classmates walk through the door and collide into the first waitress nearest to the door. The waitress accidentally spilled Coke all over him. Others eating heard the commotion and looked up. Sawyer just stood there, spellbound and embarrassed over what just took place. He was also horrified because the waitress had spilled Coke all over his brand new shirt. Heated, Sawyer looked the waitress right in the eye and lets out a bunch of insults and cuss words no one would ever want their mother to hear, then lunges himself out of the door that he just entered. The customer sat there staring after him and the waitress spellbound. Ethan couldn't believe his eyes. It was totally the waitress's fault, and she hadn't even bothered to apologize. Ethan placed money down on the table and excused himself. "I gotta get home, guys. I just remembered. I have homework to do." His friends waved after him as he bolted out the door. Ethan ran out into the parking lot and looked for Sawyer. No matter how hard he looked, he couldn't find him anywhere. Ethan found his convertible and flung himself over the door and into the driver's seat. He fished for his keys and cranked his car. "Gotta be somewhere," he thought to himself. He drove up and down the parking lot, looking around for any trace of him. After combing the lot, Ethan pulled out into the street. He drove up the street, looking on both sides, searching for any signs of Sawyer. Ethan drove a block and eventually found Sawyer walking down the street on the left-hand side. Sawyer had his hood over his head and his hands in his pocket. Looked as though he were lost in thought. He was walking slowly. Ethan eased over and slowly drove by. It was then Ethan noticed the earplugs in Sawyer's ears. Ethan waved frantically for Sawyer's attention before another car pulled up behind him. Sawyer finally noticed Ethan and pulled his headphones out of his ears. Walks over to where Ethan sat in his car. "Can I help you?" he asks. "I'm Ethan," he said, motioning towards himself. Sawyer just looks at him. "I was just at the Varsity where you were. I saw what had happened." His eyes raised slightly, and Sawyer asked, "Well, I was wondering if I could give you a ride home." Sawyer thought for a moment, then decided to allow Ethan to take him home. "Sure," Sawyer said, makes his way to the other side of the car and opens the passenger side door. He hops in, and his eyes light up over being in a convertible. He tried hiding it, but it didn't escape Ethan's notice. Back to Sawyer's place they went. He opens the door to the convertible and steps out. "Is that your car in the driveway?" Ethan asked, motioning towards the black Jeep. "Yes, I walk to Varsity for exercise. I do that periodically." "Okay, well, I figured after what you went through, maybe you would want to ride home. I was on my way out the door anyways." Sawyer smiled. "Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Definitely wasn't too happy after I left." "Yeah, I know. That girl should be fired for real." "Yeah, I agree." Sawyer turned towards the house. Then he turned back towards Ethan. "Thanks again. I really appreciate it." Sawyer released a rare smile. Ethan had never seen one before from him in all the time that he had known him. To see it now, it made Sawyer look 1,000,000 times better. It surprised Ethan to his core. Driving home, he thought about it several times. Crazy what you can find out about a person. Ethan ran around the corner of the track. His friends were cheering him on. Almost made it to the finish line when the tip of his shoe hit the concrete the wrong way and made him fall forward off of his feet. The impact was intense. He fell onto his face and rolled. When it was over, he was cut and bruised all over. The track coach ran over and bent down. Ethan was conscious, but in a lot of pain. A lot of students were also gathering. The coach picked him up, and several students helped to cart him to the nurse's station. Ethan laid on his back on the bed miserably. Shortly afterwards, Sawyer walks in with a thermometer. When he sees Ethan on the bed, his heart skips a beat. "What happened to you? You get into a fight?" Ethan looked over and was surprised to even see him. "What are you doing here?" "My mom is a nurse here." Ethan just looked at him. "And I help out a lot after school sometimes." "I need to take your temperature, Ethan. Can you sit up for me?" Rolling his eyes, Ethan sat up and opened his mouth. Sawyer stuck the thermometer in expertly and waited. A minute or so later, he took it out again, then wrote something down on a clipboard. "Okay, Mom should be with you shortly." "Cool," remarked Ethan. Sawyer turned to leave and then thought twice. "So you never really answered my question. What happened to you?" Ethan opened his eyes. "I fell during a race, running track." "Ouch, dude." Lying his head back down, Ethan prayed. Sawyer's mom would give him something strong to knock him out. In minutes, he was back to sleep. Ethan's parents were livid over the injuries of their son, went to the school board and complained, upon several of the faculty. Ethan was allowed to stay home for an entire week and recover. Talking about a happy camper, Ethan smiled from ear to ear the entire time. He went online to complete whatever assignments he had for his classes and stayed caught up. He was waited on hand and foot. After a week, he recovered and went back to school. Sawyer was at his locker looking through his things when he saw a hand prop suddenly on the side of his opened locker door. Alarmed, Sawyer spun around, ready to confront the culprit invading his space. Shock went all through him to see that it was Ethan. Heat rose from his cheeks. "Hey," Ethan smiled. "Hey," Sawyer returned, unsure of himself. "What's up?" Ethan leaned in slightly, closing to Sawyer's face. "I wanted to apologize if I had been a butthole to you a week ago when I fell. I was really out of it, and I don't even remember all that we talked about." Sawyer fought a smile. "Oh, it's okay. I don't even remember myself." Several students walked by and stared at Ethan and Sawyer. Sawyer just stared back, almost angered. Ethan never really noticed. Sawyer turned his attention back to Ethan and ignored how unnerved he suddenly was. Ethan patted him on the shoulder. "Okay, well, I will let you get back to your routine. See you later." He winked at Sawyer, and Sawyer just nodded back. "Strange," he said to himself, then went back to his books, thinking about how weird it was that Ethan was starting to befriend him. Strange indeed. Sawyer attended the next pep rally in school. He had with a mixture of bitterness and interest. He had heard Ethan was running in a race sponsored by the school, but hated how the whole school was forced to attend. Most of the time, students had an option on whether or not they wished to attend, but this particular time, there wasn't a choice. Sawyer made his way across the bleachers, sat down on the very top row. There he would watch the race in peace. He had brought a book to read while the festivities passed by. None of his classmates could be seen. Sawyer was content sitting alone. When the whistle sounded for the runners to take their mark, Sawyer looked up from his book, spotted Ethan in the lane 3. Once the pistol fired, every single runner took off. He was in awe over how fast the guys were running, recognized a few of the runners from his class. But what kept him spellbound the most was how fast Ethan ran. He mastered each curve perfectly and gained even more distance away from his competition. When it was over, he had literally killed it. Winning first place was normal for him. Sawyer had never watched a track race ever. He loved playing sports, but hated watching them. Took very little interest in his school sports. When the pep rally was over, everyone had oohed and awed over Ethan's triumphant win. Everyone left the track field and slowly began to leave school, having been dismissed once the rally was over. Sawyer made it to his car in record time. When he sat in his Jeep, he looked up in time to see Ethan standing beside a bunch of his friends staring across the parking lot at him. When he stared back, Ethan waved. Sawyer waved back, again taken aback by Ethan's sudden friendliness. All the way home, Sawyer couldn't get the race out of his mind. For the first time ever, he had finally enjoyed a pep rally. In the coming weeks, Sawyer saw Ethan periodically throughout school. Now that Ethan had made himself known to Sawyer, it was very common for Ethan to pass Sawyer in the hallway and wave. He was amazed. He'd even cared that Ethan spared some of his attention. But little by little, he even looked for Ethan in the hallway or on his way to his car to see if he'd get a passing glance of him or something. Ethan was a very friendly person, and there were many people pinning for his time and friendship. He knew this too. He was surprised he allowed Ethan to even win him over. Ethan was that type of person. Everybody loved him. Ethan was doing his homework at the kitchen counter while his mom cooked dinner when a frustrated whelp rang from Ethan's lips. Mrs. Fester jumped out of her skin, then looked over at Ethan. "What's wrong with you all of a sudden?" He looked back at her. "I'm frustrated. I can't figure out what I'm doing in this chapter. Calculus is just so hard." His mom sighed and shrugged. "Your dad urged you to take a lighter schedule this year since it was your senior year, but you had to challenge yourself, didn't you? Now you're just stuck struggling." His mom smiled as she nagged her son. "It's not funny, Mom. I could get a bad grade if I'm not careful." "Well," Mrs. Fester responded, "why don't you consider hiring a tutor from your school to help you after school? Your dad and I will pay for it. I think it'll only be for 30 minutes a day. You could afford some extra tutoring, especially seeing as how your face looked just now." How was it that his mom always had the right answers? Smiling, he walked over and kissed his mom on the forehead. "Thank you, Mom. I will ask my counselor about it first thing in the morning." "Good," his mom said. "Now go get your dad. It's time to eat." After arranging to receive a tutor, the counselors told Ethan that they would like to meet with Sawyer Lancelot. He is one of our elite tutors. Ethan almost doubled over in laughter when he saw Sawyer. He nearly turned yellow. Sawyer stopped forward and extended his hand to Ethan and Mrs. Fester. The counselor introduced them, then they were dismissed. With the paperwork already filled, they were free to leave. His mom hugged her son and told him that she would see him at home. Once she left, Ethan turned around to face Sawyer. "Wow, I had no idea you were going to be my tutor. I'm all kinds of shocked." "You're telling me," he smiled. "I feel like our paths are just crossing." "Yeah, I guess." Ethan suddenly felt awkward. "Well, anyways, I guess we should exchange cell phone numbers. Mom paid for tutoring, so I guess I shouldn't disappoint her, huh?" "Yeah, that's right." Sawyer recited his cell phone number. Then Ethan programmed it into his cell phone. "I will text you mine later. I have to go. I'm late for practice." He then ran off before Sawyer could think of something else to say. "Where exactly were you struggling?" Sawyer asked Ethan. "All these problems are right." "Yeah, but it's like pulling one tooth at a time. I don't understand my teacher when she teaches it, and I have to pore over it for hours before I can even understand it." As he's flipping through the books, he asks, "Are you ready?" "Yeah, I'm ready." So Sawyer begins to explain the principles of the chapter and helped Ethan to see why he was struggling the way he was. It took an hour, but afterwards Ethan would breathe a little bit easier. "This should help me a lot. Thanks." "You're welcome. I gotta give your mom your money's worth." "Cool. How long did she pay for?" "I think your counselor said for a month, so I guess I'll be tutoring you for about a month." "Okay," Ethan said. Sawyer left Ethan's house and went home, thinking about what had taken place, and glad that he could make a difference in the life of a fellow classmate. Later on, Ethan was on the phone with one of his crushes. Alex was a sweet but wild girl, with red hair and always wearing the same color lipstick. She was always hounding Ethan about something. This particular time was no different. "So you're not going to go to the party? Ethan, it's your senior year. You have to lighten up," she yelled. "I have a study date. I'm struggling in calculus, and I have to have this help. Otherwise, I would go." "Can't you just bring your books and your study partner over and study there? You can do both, you know. Everybody respects you and would let you study for a while, too." He considers the possibility. "I'll have to run it by him first." "Cool. Well, hit me back once you know something." Ethan knew asking Sawyer to go to the party wasn't going to be easy. He knew Sawyer had withdrawn and antisocial, but he judged Sawyer for it. In fact, sometimes Ethan was jealous. He never had time to himself, always busy trying to make someone else happy. He envied Sawyer's quiet world, but still, Ethan knew it wasn't going to be easy to get Sawyer to go, especially when he opened the door and saw that Sawyer wasn't in a good mood. "Sup, dude? What's wrong with you? You look angry." "Really? I always look like this. You know I'm not a big smiler." "Yeah, that's true." He motioned for Sawyer to come in and observe him as he made his way to the living room to set up for the study session. He let Sawyer set the scene, then Ethan got his own books and placed them on the table. "Hey, I have a question to ask you." He looked up at Ethan with raised eyebrows. Something about Ethan's tone didn't set him right. "Yeah? What is it?" Ethan was suddenly nervous. "My friends wanted to know if you wanted to go to a party tonight. We'd take our books there and study, and just hang out. He looked at Ethan like he was crazy. I don't go to parties, you know that. That's not how I have fun. Becoming your tutor did not include parties or hanging out with you outside of school activities. Sawyer wasn't rude about it. He just stated that he had to say as a matter of fact. It was Ethan's turn now to raise his eyebrows. Yeah, I've seen how you roll. You walk through the halls alone. You eat lunch in the library to avoid the awkwardness of sitting alone. Sawyer went to respond to that one, but he held up his hand to silence him. During PE, you work out by yourself and never speak to anyone. When you leave school each day, I never see you walk out of the building with anyone. You are always by yourself, all of the time. I understand the need for solitude, but 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? I mean, come on. Ethan slammed his book on the table and stormed off out of the dining room. Sawyer stared after him with a mixture of fury and hurt etched onto his face. Sawyer's reasoning was different from Ethan's. Felt like Ethan breached a level of trust. Gave a special part of himself to Ethan he had never allowed another to have. Another classmate, anyway. Ethan had been a confidant, a real friend, a hidden source of encouragement. I mean, Sawyer would look for him in halls and secretly hope that Ethan would look his way and say hello. He looked forward to those moments, thought about them often. Then the words Ethan had reverberated back through his ears. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, constantly alone. He was sincerely hurt. I don't have to take this, he thought. Sawyer grabbed his jacket and flung it on, and hurriedly grabbed his books, flung them into his book bag. He hurried out the door in a flash, and accidentally slammed it in the process. He stomped to his car and made it to the end of the driveway when Ethan's front door opened in a fury. "Where do you think you're going?" Ethan screamed in a fury. "Where does it look like I'm going? You can't just walk out and leave. My mom paid you for your time. I don't have to stay here and take your abuse, dude." "What abuse? Everything I said was true." "No, it's not," Sawyer screamed back, dropped his book bag, and ran at Ethan. Got right in front of him and pushed him as hard as he could. "Just because I'm not like you and your stupid friends doesn't mean I am alone or pathetic." "Have I ever demoralized you, Ethan? Have I made any rude comments about your lifestyle or the way you do things? No, I never have." He turned and stomped away from Ethan, grabbing his book bag in the process. Once in the car, Sawyer skidded out of Ethan's driveway and shot into the street and up the road as fast as his car could take him. Ethan just watched Sawyer drive off, feeling so bad that he could cry. "Why do I even care about this guy?" was his final thought before he rushed back inside to tell his friends he was on his way to the party. For the first time in his life, he drank a beer. Unfortunately, he didn't just stop at one. He downed 2, then 3. Everybody looked at him and watched him as if he had gone crazy. Whenever he was questioned about it, Ethan would shrug their questions off and start on a new one. He got drunk and passed out in the living room on the sofa of his friend's house. When the party ended at 3, Ethan wasn't coherent enough to drive himself home, or even wake up. His parents were called. His dad had to drive all the way to his son's friend's house and literally pick him up and carry him to the car and take him home. Morning came and Ethan woke up. He found a letter on his pillow beside his head. It read, "You are grounded, young man," in his dad's handwriting. Ethan didn't have time to think about it, though, because he started vomiting all over his bed the moment that he had woken up. Hangover City. Ethan vomited and vomited. It was so bad and so loud that his parents came rushing into his room in a panic. When they all saw the puke, both of his parents went reeling. He prayed for death to take him. His mom and dad became nurses that day. Their poor son was in no condition to do anything for himself. His mom promised certain retribution once babying his son was over. Ethan knew it, saw it in his eyes. By 10 o'clock that night, Ethan was finally at peace. His bed was clean, and his room smelled good, thanks to his parents' care. It was then that Ethan thought of Sawyer. Closing his eyes, a single tear slid down his cheek. Minutes later, he was out like a light. Several days later, Ethan found Sawyer at their school's baseball field. He was leaning against a fence texting. Ethan was on the other side and watched him for a second. Finally, Ethan said Sawyer's name, and he jumped. Turning around, Sawyer faced Ethan. A look of fury went into Sawyer's face once he recognized him. Turning around, Sawyer walked away in a hurried stupor. Ethan stomped after him. "Hey, wait." Sawyer didn't slow down even a notch. "Stop, Sawyer." Ethan ran after him. He caught up to Sawyer's side. He grabbed his wrist. "Stop." Sawyer turned in a rage and faced him. Ethan threw his arms around Sawyer and forced him into a bear hug. "Let me go, dude," Sawyer yelled. He had his hand on Ethan's arm, trying to pry them off of him. "No, not until you listen to me." He could smell Ethan's sweat. Ethan had just come from a workout. "I don't have anything to say to you. I'm sorry." "Please stop, Sawyer. Please. I care about you." Sawyer heard a small squeak in Ethan's voice. A sob. Something vulnerable and pure. Sawyer's resolve faltered. Instead of forcing Ethan's arm away, Sawyer went to embracing Ethan back. "Okay," he said gently. "All right." Both of them hugged each other for several minutes. When both men finally realized each other, they accidentally looked into each other's eyes. When it happened, everything changed. Ethan knew he had fallen in love for the first time ever in his life. Ethan ran across the finish line first place. All that day he kept thinking about Sawyer. If it had been a girl, Ethan would have been smiling from ear to ear. Plus, he would have told the girl how he felt. With Sawyer being a guy, he wasn't too inclined on telling him. Not until he was able to look into the situation more deeply. He was sure Sawyer was straight, but he still couldn't shake the feeling he had. Day by day, they had only been getting stronger. As he thought about it, looking back, he realized he had been drawn to Sawyer for quite a while. Ethan went into the locker room into a daze thinking about Sawyer even more, and ran right into the captain of the football team. "Ow," both guys yelled simultaneously. Tyler Terrence saw that it was Ethan, and instantly forgave him. Everyone knew and loved him. "Sorry about that, buddy. It was my fault," Tyler said, though truly it had been Ethan's. "No, it was mine. I'm sorry about that," Ethan smiled and hurried by. He changed back into his school clothes, then made his way back into the school building. Ethan walked through the halls looking for him. Didn't even see him anywhere. Went through the motions and attended all of his classes, then went home and got some sleep. He was grounded for 4 more days, so he couldn't really do anything. He was still feeling kind of bad over disappointing his parents, so he tried to avoid them so as not to make matters worse. Ethan woke up to the sound of his cell phone ringing. It was Sawyer. Ethan's heart started beating hard in his chest. Breathing in, Ethan answered the phone. "Hey, what's up?" Ethan sounded much softer than he meant to, but played it pretty cool. "Hey, I was wondering if you still wanted me to come over and tutor you. We still have 3 sessions this week." "Yeah," Ethan said. "Please do. I'll remind my mom." "Okay. Bye," and then hung up. The doorbell rang, and Ethan answered the door. He answered it a little too eagerly because Sawyer was amazed at how fast the door had opened. With a big smile, Sawyer met Ethan's gaze. Wow, that was pretty fast. Ethan smiled and pretended to laugh heartily. Realizing his mistake, Ethan took a deep breath as they made their way into the living room. "Need to relax," Ethan thought. Sawyer sat down on the sofa and opened Ethan's calculus book. Ethan walked over and sat down beside him, looking at the book. Sawyer then looked at Ethan. "Do you remember where we left off? After last time, I sort of lost my itinerary and lessons plans on this." Nervous, Ethan did his best to remember where they last left off. In no time at all, Sawyer gained momentum. Before they knew it, the session ended. He headed for the front door with his book bag when Ethan called his name. Sawyer turned around, bemused. "Yes? Would you like to come over tomorrow and play Call of Duty? I could use your wit on how to beat this one area I'm stuck in." Sawyer's eyebrows raised slightly. Ethan took it as a sign to be careful. It was clear he was still hurt over their last fight. "Sure, sounds like fun." Breathing a sigh of relief, Ethan smiled. Inside, though, he was a mess. It was obviously took more time for Sawyer to get over things than it did Ethan. "Sawyer," Ethan said. Sawyer turned around again. "Listen, about the night of our fight." Sawyer listened in. I wanted to tell you how sorry I was for the things that I said. You're really an amazing person. Otherwise, you wouldn't have won those awards at all." He smiled. "Thanks. I appreciate you saying that." Ethan returned the smile. Sawyer pulled into Ethan's driveway, feeling apprehensive about coming over to play a video game. He almost said no. He liked Ethan, but felt both of them were from two separate sides of the track. The fights they had had days before proved it. He wanted to avoid another at all costs. Ethan met him at the door. He was smiling from ear to ear. Typical Ethan, he thought. Ethan and Sawyer played Call of Duty for over 3 hours before Sawyer got tired. He stated that he was getting exhausted. "My parents went to church to attend some type of seminar. Would you like to stay for dinner? I'm cooking." Sawyer thought about it for a moment. Sure, why not? Oh, great. Ethan was nervous as he got out his mom's cookbook and read through a few of the recipes. Within 30 minutes, Ethan found the perfect meal to prepare: white cheese pizza from scratch. Ethan had the dough perfectly flat in 20 minutes. Then he started on the sauce. It was much easier. Once the spread was done, Ethan started on the cheese, added spinach to the mix. Once he finished, he placed the pizza into the oven for 30 minutes to cook. While the pizza cooled, he went upstairs to take a quick shower. He was filthy from all of that dough. He also put on some nicer clothing. Sawyer had dressed very nicely for their time together, so Ethan wanted to do the same. Also put on some cologne. His favorite was Aspen. Sawyer didn't read too much into it. Then he finished, went back downstairs to get the pizza and to see how Sawyer was going to like it. He entered into his living room looking like $1,000,000, carrying his pizza right along. Sawyer looked first at the pizza, at him. "Wow, Ethan, I've never seen you wear clothes like that." Sawyer actually smiled as he said it. Ethan got goosebumps. "Well, you know, I kind of got messy from the pizza dough, so I had to change. Here, let me help you with that." Sawyer grabbed the dish and helped Ethan with the pizza. Once everything was ready, they began to eat. Ethan took one look at Sawyer's downing his pizza like a snake and knew he'd done a terrific job cooking. When they finished dinner, Sawyer had to go. He said bye and then left. Ethan watched him leave, then went back to his room to get a little bit of sleep. It had been a rather long evening, and he wanted to rest. He secretly hoped Sawyer was getting over their fight, and hoped he was now thinking he had made an awesome new friend in Ethan. Sawyer drove home and replayed the events of the day with Ethan. Made a mental note to write down new lesson plans for their calculus sessions. He wanted Ethan to not only pass, but to make an A. He saw the potential. Plus, nobody took calculus their senior year in high school. He was obviously very smart. One of the top 50 students in his year. Sawyer was one of the top 10. Once he got home, he texted Ethan, told him he was going to make new lesson plans. Ethan texted back saying okay. Afterwards, Sawyer decided to get some rest. Ethan and Sawyer met up every afternoon for the rest of the week. They had 3 sessions scheduled each week for 3 solid months, hoping his grades in calculus would improve. Not only did they meet up every afternoon that week, but they also hung out at the varsity afterwards. Ethan had to pull teeth to get Sawyer to go, but it worked. Sawyer wasn't really that hard to convince to do anything as long as you treated him right. Upon Ethan's observation, he was really a softie, just looked tough. They would eat at the varsity, then go their own separate ways afterwards. Ethan ran another race that week, and he asked Sawyer to come and watch. Sawyer said that he would. When he ran and won the first place, the person he went to afterwards was Sawyer. Ethan just sort of slipped through the crowd and found him sitting up at the highest bleacher seat where no one bothered to search for him. Together they chatted. Ethan spilled a few secrets on how he won everything as an athlete. Sawyer was amazed at how easygoing Ethan was and how easy he made everything seem. His only flaw, Sawyer saw, was in calculus. However, even then, he managed to get everything right after only explaining it to him twice. Sawyer believed the real fault lied with the teacher. He just didn't make that known. When the week ended and the weekend arrived, Sawyer was texted by Ethan, asking if he wanted to go jogging early in the evening at the park not too far from where Sawyer lived. Ethan explained that it would only be for a few minutes. Sawyer agreed on the condition that Ethan took it easy on him, since he wasn't a runner. They met at Wicket Park, and together they jogged the half-mile trail a few times before Sawyer said that he was tired. They parted ways again. Ethan was pursuing Sawyer with fervent passion. However, he almost knew Sawyer was straight. Still, he could not shake how he felt for him. I'm going to have to tell him eventually. On the soccer field, Ethan was teaching Sawyer how to kick a ball sideways at an angle when a couple of students came out of practice. Sawyer was amazed at how easy it was to replicate the gesture. "Hey, Ethan," Josh Liner yelled from across the field. Josh was 5'11" with long, stringy black hair and blue eyes. Girls all over talked about him as if he were a star from a magazine. Ethan looked up and acknowledged him, then went back to talking to Sawyer. Josh jogged up to Ethan and Sawyer with two other boys following. Josh took one look at who Ethan was hanging out with, and he nearly had a physical, sick reaction. "Sawyer Lancelot, hanging out with Ethan Fester." Josh looked at Ethan. "What's going on?" indicating the things with Sawyer, even looking and hinting towards him. Ethan looked at him like he was crazy. "Teaching Sawyer how to play soccer." He laughed out loud. "Sawyer, play soccer? As if, dude." Sawyer instantly froze with rage. "What did you just say?" Josh just stood his ground. "You playing soccer? It's a joke. I don't think it's any of your business. I'm on this school soccer team. I believe I would know an idiot in cliques if I saw one." Sawyer went for Josh. He swung his fist high in the air at Josh's face, but Josh just dodged it. Sawyer was just about ready to go for him again when Ethan rushed him and stopped him from trying. "Take it easy. He ain't worth it." Sawyer shook Ethan off of him and marched back in the direction of the gymnasium. Ethan went tailing after him. Josh and his two friends watched in amazement. "If I hadn't had these damn cleats on, I would have gotten him," Sawyer said, jerking the cleats from his feet, throwing it across the locker room. Ethan was right behind him. "Sawyer, you don't want to fight anyone before graduation. It would interfere with your studies. That's why I don't put myself in situations like that. I stay away from brainless freaks like Josh. I do my very best to avoid any and all people whenever I hit you up. I know more than anyone how these people are. Well, I'm tired of doing it. I can't even concentrate anymore." "What does that mean?" "People look at me as if I have the plague. Apparently people around school have seen us hang out and have developed some sort of opinion about it. I went from being ignored and left alone to being looked at and seen as a wart on someone's nose. It's not how I want to live out my senior year or my school life." By then, Sawyer had changed clothes and was now wearing what he had on before. Sawyer walked out of the locker room, slamming the door in the process. Ethan just watched him leave, afraid he'd make matters worse if he followed. Ethan thought about what Sawyer said all the way home from school. Had no idea Sawyer had been going through stuff on the account of him. He knew Sawyer wasn't the most popular guy in school, but he had no idea people would hate the idea of him hanging out with Sawyer. What's worse is how people haven't even mentioned it to Ethan. Sawyer was the one going through it all. He was so surprised about it, he didn't even know what to think. Ethan went by Sawyer's class, curious about his mood. The day before, he was very angry at the world, mostly at Josh, but deep down, wondering if his anger stemmed from hanging out with him. He saw Sawyer talking to one of his teachers. Apparently it was about something important, because he had a serious look on his face. To Ethan's relief, it wasn't filled with rage like the day before. My essay projected the photo with complete accuracy. "I don't understand why you marked off incorrect marks here," he exclaimed to his English professor. Ethan backed away from the door, feeling a tad bit better. He felt good enough to leave a little note in Sawyer's locker. "Meet me under the bleachers of the football field at 12:45 p.m. And then he ran off before Sawyer saw him. He was about to leave upset at 12:50 when he saw Sawyer popped up out of nowhere. "Sorry that I'm late," he said. "Got held up with my teachers. I swear it's like they've smoked an ounce of weed today or something. None of them are acting right." Ethan laughed. "It's all right, dude." Sawyer sat down on a rock and made himself comfortable. "Mr. Ferris gave me some time to rewrite this essay I got a low grade on, and I need to get that done as soon as possible, so let's make this quick." Ethan was completely thrown by this. "I'm sorry. Are you still mad over yesterday or something?" You've never dissed me over an excuse for schoolwork before. No, it's not that. I'm serious. I'm in a time tornado right now. I'm familiar with schoolwork, Sawyer. I know how the routine works. I'm an elite scholar here, to believe it or not. You've never been this blunt with me before. That's all I'm saying. And it just so happens to have been the day after you and Josh had gotten into it, which by chance was not my fault. So don't take your frustration out on me. Sawyer jumped up and into Ethan's face. I'm not taking my frustration out on you. I'm just saying I don't want you to do this anymore. You're more trouble than you're worth, and I'm tired of playing the part. The first day you even spoke to me, I thought I was going to get hit by a fucking car. You've tried to drag me to parties where people get shit-faced drunk at, because your people are looking at me like I am from another planet. Also because of you, I had been in almost 2 fights. You aren't exactly a good luck charm. If anything, you are a big-ass nuisance, and I wish you would just leave me the hell alone. Sawyer was about to run away when Ethan caught him by his arm. What are you going to do? Run away again? That's your answer for everything, isn't it? Have you ever thought that maybe the problem here is you? Why do you think everyone hates you so much? It's because you're an awful person that hates relationships and yourself. That's why you run away from everything. So don't take your frustration and anger out on me. You only have yourself to blame. Then Ethan forced himself into a hug. But you're my good friend, and I'm not giving up on you. Sawyer hadn't put up a fight since his arm had been taken. But now that Ethan had put him into a hug, he started to squirm. I have to go. Let go of me. Ethan let go of Sawyer. Sawyer walked away without another word. Ethan felt like crying, like a small child. Ethan cried all the way home in his car. How could I let a guy like Sawyer get a hold of my heart? Why me, of all people? Ethan wanted to text Sawyer, but nothing ever sounded right. He always ended up tossing his phone aside instead. At school, he began to change towards people. He started to look at them differently, no longer the way he'd seen them before. Many called his cell and got no answer. Many spoke to him in the hall, but their voice fell on deaf ears. Ethan viewed his high school career as almost over. He had a few more months, and he'd be looking forward to college. He'd already been accepted to Duke University anyways. Literally, he fell off the face of the earth except for his continued success in sports and academics. Because of his school and the students there, he no longer had the love of his life. Sawyer didn't show up at Ethan's house the following Monday for the tutoring session, and Ethan was livid. He called the school and reported him to the vice principal. Afterwards, the vice principal went into Sawyer's class and bellowed, yelling at Sawyer and telling him that he needed to be on his way and that he could finish whatever he's doing tomorrow. Sawyer closed his folders and made a hasty retreat. Do you see this contract, young man? Paid for your services, and it's been paid in full for the whole month. Would you like to tell me why you're not at Ethan's house doing what you legally promised to do? Sawyer was stunned into silence. None of the adults or any of the teacher faculty have ever raised their voice at him. He was literally about to cry. Look, I'm not getting along with the student in question. I thought it would be best to just end my services. Your decision to make. Why aren't you getting along with him? I haven't really got an answer. I should report this to your mother. Sawyer's eyes grew big. Don't do that. I'll just finish my contract. He needs help in the future, though. He will need another tutor. I can't do it again after this. One more infraction like this, and you are suspended. My suggestion to you? Report any absences henceforth. And please, keep a copy of this contract in case you are tempted to do anything this irresponsible again. In our conversation in your memory, you are dismissed. Sawyer grabbed his book bag and left, shaken to the core. Ethan's doorbell rang while he was pulling the trash from the can. Coming, Ethan called out. He washed his hands and then answered the door. Sawyer stood there looking like a dead zombie, completely expressionless. Care for the study session, Sawyer? Yes, and 30 minutes is all you get with me. Ethan was snapped back into reality real quick. Sawyer, don't take your frustration out on me. I'm not the one that signed the contract, then tried to bail on it. No, you're not, Sawyer replied sarcastically. Ethan had to bite his tongue to keep from saying something rude, and it was very hard to stay in a good mood. Sawyer walked into the living room and slammed his books onto the table. Then he began to set up the study session. Up at Ethan, he said, Don't just stand there. Go get your books, and let's get started. I've got my own homework and studying to do. Ethan ran upstairs and grabbed his calculus book. Coming back down, he sat down near Sawyer and turned to the chapter that they last studied together. Sawyer began to explain the chapter and mechanically went through it with Ethan. Ethan could tell there was no joy or enthusiasm in his voice. His face spelled out misery, and Ethan was about to lose it. "Sawyer, what is your problem? You really look sick. Just you're dying or something? It's not that bad." "I hate you, Ethan. What can I say?" "Wow," he said in disgust. "Well, hate me as much as you want, but go through the formulas right. Do your job the way you did it before, or I'll go to the vice principal. I'm serious about my calculus grade." "Then sit up and act like you're interested. You aren't even paying any attention. You have some kind of lopsided smile on your face that I wish I could slap off." Ethan sat up and sat much closer to Sawyer. "Then teach." Sawyer went back to his lesson and tried to put a little more passion into his voice. He could tell, too. He was satisfied for the moment, but he knew that he'd asked more from Sawyer as the sessions continued. A couple days later, Sawyer then ran around the track. He stretched. He was alone on the field. It was the next day, and he hadn't spoken to Sawyer all day. Tried not to look for him, but it was hard. He accidentally did it out of habit twice. Ran another lap and thought about the past events that led him to where he was now. He'd have another session with Sawyer the next day. Kept thinking about it, wondered if he could find something to say that could make a difference in their otherwise tarnished relationship. The only thing that kept Ethan going was the promise of another private moment with Sawyer, and maybe an opportunity to repair what had been destroyed by the students at his school. Fresh tears formed in Ethan's eyes. God, I love that boy. He jogged another lap, wondering how in the heck he ended up becoming such a sap. Sawyer marked all of Ethan's answers correct. "Okay, we're done for the day," Sawyer said. He clapped his book shut, and in a haste. Ethan sat up. "No, Sawyer, we still have 10 minutes. My mom paid for 30 full minutes." Scowled. "You got all your answers right. I have nothing else to teach you today." "Then sit there and look pretty then," Ethan snapped back. Sawyer looked as though he were about to blow up. The only thing that kept him from jumping on Ethan was the threat Ethan had to go to the vice principal. Sawyer had never been manipulated or controlled by anybody his whole life. Why on earth was he allowing Ethan to do it now was beyond him. "You aren't cute, just so you know." Ethan laughed and smiled with pure delight. "Oh, Sawyer, but really I am." "The girls think so. You're just mad because I'm making you do your job." He looked away and relished every uncomfortable second Sawyer had. Thursday, Ethan called in sick from school. He was so tired and had nothing to do, nor any tests to take. He used that particular moment to regain new strength and prepare for his final tutoring session of the week with Sawyer. Ethan cried a little, letting his heart break as healthily as he could. He'd be glad when it completely healed. His mom stood in Ethan's doorway. Ethan was on his stomach in the bed looking at a comic. His mom tapped on the door frame, and Ethan looked up. "Why didn't you go to school today?" she asked. "Mom, come on. I haven't called in any this year. Not feeling myself today. I needed the break. I had nothing to turn in, nor work to do. I know your grades are great, but you love going to school. I have never seen you apathetic like this." She walked in, sat down on the edge of the bed. "Look me in the eye." He looked up and over at his mother. When his eyes met hers, he literally lost it. "Oh my God, Mom, I have lost it," he said, rushing into her arms. He gripped his mom's arm like a vice. "My heart has been torn into pieces." "This is over a girl, right?" Ethan cried even more. "Yes, Mom, a girl. A spoiled, rotten, horrible girl that I got cursed into falling in love with." His mom held her son. For 5 minutes he cried and cried. When it was over, his mom let him go and asked him to look up at her. "Look, Ethan, growing up isn't always easy to do, but it's necessary in life. Your heart will heal. It will take a little while, but I promise your heart will eventually heal." Ethan wiped his tears with the back of his hand. "How do you know?" "Because I've had my heart broken too. Everyone has. It's a part of life." "Yeah, I know, but it's so hard." "Of course it is. Love is never easy. Wait till you get married. It's even worse." Ethan and Miss Fester laughed over that. She reached over for her son again. Just give it a little bit more time. If you need anything, you know that I'm here. So is your father. Oh, Mom, thanks for the talk. Miss Fester smiled as a tear from her son nearly slid down her cheek. Baby. Ethan returned to school more energized than the day before. He smiled a little bit more, and several people even gained the confidence to approach and say hi to him. He still remembered how they had ruined his love life, but he was a little more accommodating than before. He went through his day focused completely on school and didn't think about Sawyer once. When he drove home, he took a shower and changed clothes. He brushed his teeth and looked as good as he could possibly muster. 10 minutes didn't even pass before the doorbell rang. Ethan walked down the stairs and grabbed the doorknob. Taking a deep breath, he took a small leap into the future, holding on to what little courage he had left, and opened up the door. Sawyer had his book bag on his back and looked as good as ever. He looked at Ethan and waited to be invited in. He slowly gave the invitation. Sawyer walked in, and Ethan closed the door behind him. How was your day today? Sawyer walked on and only half listened. Fine, I guess. Normal as usual. Both guys set up the session and were begun within minutes. Ethan listened intently as Sawyer poured onto the lesson as the best as he could. Ethan took notes and listened. Your grades been? I've been curious on how my tutoring has benefited you. The truth? Well, it hasn't been too bad. 89 is my average. It could have been worse. Before the tutoring, I had a C- or a 75. I want to make an A, but with only a few weeks left in the quarter, I really don't think that that is possible. It's really not impossible. You could ask your teacher for extra credit. To be honest, Sawyer, I'm so sick of that school. I'll be glad when it's over. You too, huh? Yeah, there isn't a single person there that I really like, and that's pretty bad coming from me. It's not surprising, though. That school is awful. Where are you going? I don't know yet. I'm torn between Harvard and Stanford. I received acceptance letters from both universities. Mom has the money to send me, so trust me, it won't be in this town. I got accepted to Duke. I haven't even opened any of the other letters. I'm glad to be leaving this place. Awesome. Well, it looks like we are finished here. Sawyer began to pack his things. The hasty way he was doing it made Ethan's heart ache. Sawyer, please don't let this school tear us apart. You are the first real friend that I've ever made here. Sawyer just looked at him. Ethan, every time I get near you, I wind up experiencing difficulty of some kind. We parted ways. I haven't had any drama, hardly any inconveniences, and my life is getting back to the way that it was. I explained to your low-life friends I am tutoring you in calculus, and now they've started leaving me alone, and I couldn't be happier with the outcome. Besides, you will meet new people in college. Why waste time and energy on me? Ethan just shook his head in disagreement, cheeks red. Ethan let Sawyer go. Once the front door closed, Ethan fell to the floor and sobbed like a little child. Ethan jogged around his neighborhood in deep thought. He had 4.5 more months before school ended, and only a month and a half left with Sawyer as his tutor. He kept wondering what he would do to salvage his relationship with him. Not only that, but he also wanted to revive the connection that was there. Unfortunately, he didn't have any ideas on how to do that. I don't really know how to salvage the relationship, Mom. I've done everything I know to do. And you say it's because of school, right? Well, everybody has been sticking their nose in a friendship and making things hard for him. They've told him he's not good enough for me and laugh at him. He says they aren't doing it anymore, so he'd prefer not to be in a friendship with me. Why does this mean so much to you? Because it's the first real friend that I've made. That's why. You could go to the principal. They have a way of disciplining the whole school when stuff like this occurs. Really? Yes, I'll even go with you tomorrow. The next day, Ethan and his mom make their way through the school and into the principal's office early the next morning. The principal was a serious man and no pushover. He'd been hard to handle if you didn't weigh your words carefully. He walked into his office, looking like a man on a mission. Funny thing about it was, so did Mrs. Fester. What can I do for you two? Yes, she said, beating Ethan to the punchline. I'm here today to inquire about our policy on school bullying. Why? What seems to be the problem? I'm on the school board, which means I could have your job, answered Don't ask any. He was literally knocked backwards. Well, of course, our school is against anything heinous like that. One of your students is experiencing it. Which one? A very prominent one. I'm taking it to the next school board meeting if it's not taken care of. His name is Sawyer Lancelot. Do not disrupt this boy's high school career over this matter either. Well, thank you. I will see what I can do. She bade Ethan farewell and told him to keep her posted. He promised. Bye. She marched out of the office and ran the next race with a huge smile and all the hope in the world. He won first place. A lot of people tried to congratulate him, but they were all cut off. Ethan ran to the back of the bleachers and rested, pouring sweat. He pulled out his phone. Sawyer, he texted, I won the final race of my senior year. Of course, he knew Sawyer wasn't going to text back, but he had to keep up impressions. Afterwards, he hurried off to his car before anyone else could find him. Ethan and Sawyer were friends. Sawyer told Ethan about a place he'd go to unwind or to be alone. It was at this nice lake with a ridge over it. Lights that shone over the waters every night year-round. Sky blue in color. Ethan had been wanting to check it out for the longest. He actually pictured doing it with Sawyer. Tonight, though, after having won his final race of the year, decided to go to check it out on his own. There was a small surprise for him there, too. Sawyer stood over the lake and watched the ship sail across the water. He'd been coming here since he was old enough to drive. Had actually found it by accident. Now he enjoyed the cool breeze that blew by. It was getting nippy, but perfect for tonight. He thought about a lot of things. Thought about his grades. He thought about his parents. He also thought about college and went back and forth mentally, still trying to decide where he wanted to go. He wished that he could say he was going to miss this place, but wasn't. Not long ago, he received a text from Ethan, informing him he had won the school's final. Apparently, Ethan didn't understand what Sawyer meant by, leave me alone. He hardly had the words to describe that particular situation. No words at all. Ethan parked by a rocky road that dipped upwards around the ground from the street. It was very becoming. Ethan got out slowly and looked around. It was quite breathtaking. He'd been to this area before. He realized this. During the day, it was even more amazing. It was so impressive. Rich movie stars lived there. Ethan had seen it for himself. He walked on and began to search for the bridge Sawyer had mentioned. It didn't take too long before he found it. He stepped out into the woods and looked over the edge. Saw the lights shining as Sawyer said that they would. He walked on until Ethan just happened to look up. There, in front of him, was Sawyer. Sawyer was leaning over the railing, looking onto the water. He still looked stern, but you could tell he was at peace with himself. Ethan walked slowly forward. Oh my God, I didn't expect you to be here, Ethan said gently, but cheerfully. Thrown off course, Sawyer looked up with incredible shock. There he saw Ethan in his track uniform. What are you doing here? Ethan looked down. I don't know. I guess I wanted to come out here and see what the big deal was. What made it so attractive to you and to others? Sawyer just looked at him. Plus, I needed to be alone after the race. Everyone really was getting on my nerves. He walked up and leaned onto the railing right beside Sawyer, in the exact same pose. Sawyer didn't move away. It feels good out here. It's windy and cool. It's the water. You can feel the vapors in the atmosphere, Sawyer declared. Ethan nodded at him. He moved in a little bit closer. Sawyer, he said. Sawyer looked over at Ethan. We need to talk. About what? Looking away. About a lot of things. He looked back over at the water again, trying not to allow his peace to be disturbed. Ethan put his hand on Sawyer's arm. Sawyer, I can feel you pulling away already. Can you at least give me 5 minutes of your time? He looked back at Ethan. What do you have to say that you haven't said already? The end of the year is approaching, and so is our tutoring sessions, and I need to talk to you one last time. It's for me, damn it. It doesn't even have anything to do with you. Yeah, well, I've already told you my piece, and I'm not going to keep repeating it like some cheap-ass record. I'm pretty much steady that way. I don't budge, understand? Yeah, well, maybe what I have to say this time is different. Sawyer laughed. Bullshit. Well, can I at least get this out? He looked over at the water again. He was trembling with anger, very much trying hard to control his anger. Say it, Ethan. Afterwards, the subject is dropped forever. Am I clear? Yeah. Can we start over? I know I messed things up, but... Sawyer, you're the first real friend that I have ever made. I can't lose you. I'll stand up for you and help you with whatever hardships come at you because of me. That's the thing, Ethan. I was alone. You don't know how to stand up for anyone. You're not going to bust somebody's mouth for me. I went to my mom, who's on the school board. I told her about our problem, and she informed me that she would do what she could, especially if we have any more problems. But you have to give it another chance first. She has the power to call for anyone's expulsion, especially if she feels it's violating school policy. School bullying is a big no-no. How does that help me? Well, if you tell me who's bothering you, we can stop it. The principal has promised anyone suspension who is directly related to our hardship. Please, Sawyer. No, Ethan. Just try one last time. If it fails, we go our separate ways. Sawyer looked out over the water and thought for a moment. Okay, one last time. But this is it. I'm not into drama and melodramatic stupidity. This is the last time. Ethan smiled from ear to ear. He hugged Sawyer. Literally made him turn and face him and hugged him hard. Sawyer rested his chin on Ethan's shoulder. Ethan literally shedded a tear over it. Then came the rest of them. He hoped Sawyer didn't pull away before he had a chance to wipe them away. Ethan and Sawyer walked back to their cars together. It was starting to get cold, and both had their hands deep in their pockets looking down at the ground. You'll be at my house tomorrow, right? For the tutoring? Yes, he replied. Ethan walked to the side of his car. You know, Sawyer, the lake was beautiful, as you said it'd be. He looked at Sawyer with an intense smile and held it for a long time. Sawyer's breath caught in his chest. Ethan succeeded at rapturing Sawyer's heart just then. Only time would tell where the story would go from there. Ethan, the most popular boy in school, pulled up on the bar to do his final pull-up when his hand slipped. He immediately fell, hitting his head hard on the metal railing. When he landed on the ground, he didn't land on his feet. He landed right on his side. Crying in anguish as his best friend, Sawyer, came running to his side. Ethan, are you okay? He peered down at his friend, placed his hand on his shoulder. Ethan continued to cry. No, Sawyer, I'm not. As soon as Ethan's reply came out, he blacked out unconscious. He was taken by ambulance to the hospital. The paramedics allowed Sawyer to ride with him. When they rolled Ethan in, nurses stopped Sawyer from going any further. They directed him to a finely dressed waiting room. He was told to sit tight until he was notified. Complying, he sat down, put his hands together, and prayed for Ethan to be okay. It didn't look much like anything, but Sawyer was scared and afraid for him. The knot on Ethan's head was huge, and the look on his face showed true anguish. Sawyer tried not to shed any tears, but they were trying to come out. Why is it, God, that you don't realize how important people are until they're hurt? Sawyer asked out loud, then laid back and closed his eyes. He thought about the past year with Ethan. It had been a rocky road. It had been a week since their talk by the lake. There had been no problems or fights. Sawyer was truly happy for the first time. The hand on the clock was ticking by slowly. Sawyer decided to curl up and get some sleep. He was out in minutes. Sawyer tapped on his head. Mrs. Fester was standing to the side. Worry etched on her face. Sawyer opened his eyes and looked up. I just spoke with the doctor. Ethan had a mild concussion. He's going to be fine. Why don't you go on home and we'll talk to you later? He's going to be in the hospital for 3 days to make sure that he heals properly. Okay, Sawyer replied. He pulled himself off the sofa and stretched. He looked at Mrs. Fester and gave her a hug. Afterwards, Sawyer called his mom and asked if she'd pick him up. He explained Ethan was in the hospital and went through the story the best that he could. As a nurse, Mrs. Lancelot knew all too well the things Sawyer had been through and was more than accommodating. I'll be there soon. Sawyer went outside and sat on the bench in front of the entrance and waited for his mom. Mrs. Lancelot dropped Sawyer off to Ethan's house to get his Jeep. Sawyer kissed his mom goodbye. Sawyer drove his Jeep out of Ethan's driveway and made his way to their lake. It was misty out, and Sawyer felt a little uncomfortable. He hated murky, wet weather. Truthfully, he never came out here. But tonight, with Ethan in the hospital, Sawyer felt the need to be there. He thought back on their journey together. Remembered Ethan picking him up off the side of the road near the varsity. Remembered his tutoring sessions and watching Ethan win every race that he ran. Ethan's smile appeared in Sawyer's memory, and tears began to roll down his cheek. I can't believe how much Ethan has changed my life, he thought to himself. Literally, Sawyer went from having no social life to having it all overnight. He even went out on a date a few nights ago, yet hasn't told Ethan. I owe nothing to that boy. Sawyer leaned against the railing and looked out over the lake. Once again, he prayed for Ethan to make it through. When he was finished, he left the place he was standing and walked back towards his car, still dejected inside. It spread throughout the school about what happened to Ethan. Sawyer was known for hanging out with him. People at the school didn't like it, but no one had yet to challenge it. A few students went from idol worship over Ethan to downright despising him. His reputation didn't take a dive, but it wasn't perfect anymore. Ethan didn't really care, though. He only had 4 more months before he graduated. One of the students that despised Ethan was Harold. He made his way to Sawyer's locker the second day after Ethan entered the hospital and made the mistake of running his mouth. "Heard your friend is in the hospital." Sawyer turned around and knocked Harold all the way across the hallway. He went flying into the wall and saw stars. He kept his balance, turned around, and saw Sawyer's fist hit him again. He hit the floor that time. He then kicked him in the stomach for good measure, slowly backed away, and retreated before he got in trouble by a teacher. Sawyer was livid for the rest of the day. He couldn't believe a small hit to the head could be so painful. He explained to his doctor what had happened and described the anguish he'd been in. Dr. Alex told him it wasn't uncommon to feel what he had, especially if he'd never been injured before. Called it temporary shock. Told Ethan that he was free to go, and Ethan was relieved. "You can leave as early as this afternoon. Just let me finish up with a few tests to make sure everything is fine. Then you can be on your way. Also, be sure to follow up with your primary care physician in 3 weeks. Stay in bed the first 2 days you're out, and get plenty of rest. Eat healthy and drink plenty of water." Ethan nodded. "I will swing by here around 2 and see you off." "All right," he replied. Dr. Alexander exited Ethan's room, and Ethan's medication began to take effect again. Laying his head back on the pillow, Ethan closed his eyes and went to sleep. Sawyer's cell phone rang in the middle of dinner Thursday evening, and Mr. and Mrs. Lancelot told their son to take it out in the hall and to be brief. Sawyer looked at the caller ID and saw that it was Miss Fester. Sawyer rushed into the hallway with his phone and answered immediately. "Hello?" "Hey, buddy. It's Ethan." Sawyer heard a sweet voice ring out. "Oh, God. Hey, Ethan, you sound so different." "Yeah, I'm heavily medicated. Mom and Dad just helped me to my room, and I'm out of the hospital." "I'm so glad to hear from you. I was worried about you, man." "I missed you, Sawyer. Why didn't you come see me?" "I didn't have any time. I had to return to school, and the hospital wouldn't let non-family members visit you. Yeah, Mom put up strict regulations on my behalf. Her and Dad won't play around." "I know they won't." "Okay, well, I'm home, so come and see me this weekend. I've missed you. Don't be a stranger." "Okay, Ethan, I won't. Get some rest. Bye." Sawyer hung up the phone and then returned to the dining room. Sawyer smiled from ear to ear, happy Ethan was out of the hospital and on his way to a full recovery. God had answered his prayer. Ethan hated his parents. They would not allow him to get out of bed or eat anything good. He had to drink nasty tonic twice a day, and he only was allowed water to drink. Soup or fruit were his daily diet, and it was about to drive him mad. "Mom, you can't keep me in this bed. The doctor said I had to get up and exercise." "How do you know what the doctor said?" "Because I had a private conversation with him while you slept on the couch. He told me not to let you do any physical activity for the first week you were home. That does not include walking and taking a bath. I'm not a handicap. I will not be treated like an invalid." His mom slammed the door of his bedroom. On her way out, hard his ears rattled from the echo, climbed out of bed and walked to the door. He locked the doorknob, feeling better. He went back to his bed and fell asleep in minutes. Ethan wasn't interrupted again. They're driving me crazy. Please ask your parents if I can stay with them for a little while. I'm serious. I'm so angry at my family, I could spit fire, Ethan declared to Sawyer that same night. Ethan, you know my mom and dad will let you stay here. But are you okay with bunk beds? Because you won't have your own room. Yeah, I'm fine with it. Just get permission tomorrow. I'm leaving this godforsaken place first thing I can. All right, I'll call you when I know something. Thanks. He hung up, then placed his cell phone on the dresser. Cut his light off, then laid down. Closing eyes, he thanked God for Sawyer's friendship. What? Mrs. Fester boomed. You can't just move out. You are our son. I'm moving out, Mom. You and Dad are just driving me crazy. I'm sorry. You haven't seen crazy yet. I can surely show you crazy. I will not be bullied. You walk out that door, and your ass will not be back. And you can forget about college, too. Don't threaten me. I have a scholarship, and will take out a loan. Ethan slammed the door shut, holding the last suitcase his mom caught him carrying to Sawyer's Jeep. You do that, you ungrateful brat. Don't you dare come back either, his mom screamed from the front door. Ethan raised his middle finger to Mrs. Fester to see. Surprisingly, she did it right back, and then slammed the door shut. Sawyer drove his Jeep down the road with Ethan's suitcases. He sat himself in the back seat and slept. Sawyer could easily tell Ethan was still sick. He couldn't believe he told Ethan that he could live with him. He knew his parents loved Ethan and would let him stay. That wasn't the problem. The problem he saw was how incredibly close they'd become in less than a few months. It wasn't a bad thing, but it made Sawyer a little uncomfortable. Ethan stirred feelings inside Sawyer that he had never felt before. But despite that, Sawyer knew he cared about Ethan a lot. Knew that he would help him any way he could. Ethan woke up as Sawyer's Jeep went down the rock-filled driveway. His vehicle sort of swayed back and forth, holding on to one of his suitcases. Ethan looked at Sawyer as he maneuvered his car. Are we finally there? Sawyer looked at Ethan through the rearview mirror. Yeah, we're nearly there. My parents own 40 acres of land. It's about another 2 or 3 blocks away. Oh my God, I'm going to throw up. Can you go easy on the driving, please? Ethan, it's a rocky driveway. I can't really do that. Well, I'm still sick, damn it. Sawyer stopped his car. He looked back at him. Get out and get in the front seat then. Ethan opened the door and squeezed out of Sawyer's Jeep, made his way to the front, and got into the passenger seat. Now lean your seat all the way back and get some sleep. I'll slow down, I promise. He obeyed and instantly found solace and peace. True to his word, Sawyer slowed his driving until Sawyer got to his house. There was no more arguing. Sawyer reached over and shook Ethan. Hey, we're home. Ethan smiled at the sound of that. Home? It went over Sawyer's head. Yeah, we're home. Let's grab your suitcases and set them up in your bedroom, and you can climb on the top bunk where you will be sleeping and get some sleep. Ethan nodded. Both of them got out of the car and grabbed a few suitcases and made their way inside the house. Ethan, oddly enough, had never seen Sawyer's house. Sawyer had only been to Ethan's, and Ethan was amazed at Sawyer's home. It was big, on some nice country land, and it was very clean and homey. Sawyer, your house looks amazing, Ethan said. Sawyer laughed. Everybody says that. Once they found Sawyer's bedroom, Ethan and Sawyer entered and placed the suitcases in the corner. Ethan climbed up on the top bunk and got some sleep. I'm sure you are exhausted over the drama with your mom and over the concussion you are still recovering from. My parents don't care that you are here. They just want to make sure that you take care of yourself. Treat this house as your own was my mom's message to you. I say the same thing, but only after you get some sleep, dude. He smiled, climbed up on the top bunk, laid on his back, and closed his eyes. Sawyer went and got the rest of Ethan's suitcases. When he was finished, he shut the bedroom door, turned off the light, and climbed on the top bunk and woke Ethan up. He looked at him like he was crazy. I just wanted to give you a hug. You have no idea how much I worried about you and missed you. Ethan had to force the tears from leaving his eyes. After all, he was in love with Sawyer. He hadn't told him yet how he felt, and was still sure that Sawyer was straight. Instead, Ethan sat up, reached for Sawyer, and wrapped one of his arms around him. He wrapped both of his arms around Ethan and gently caressed him. Sawyer started crying. Sorry, Ethan. I have been holding these tears in for 4 solid days now. I was really worried about you. Ethan held the hug steady and allowed Sawyer's release. Deep down, Ethan was giddy as hell, but he was also understanding where Sawyer was coming from. Seeing someone get hurt is never fun, especially someone that you care about. He had not recovered all of his strength, so eventually he just asked to be let go. Sawyer did, gave his best friend a wink, then climbed down into his own bed. Good night. Don't worry about your parents. Eventually, you'll make up with them. I know, Ethan yawned. I just need some space. Good night, man. Both boys fell asleep minutes later. Ethan had to take it easy for a total of 2 months. Really, 6 weeks. He also had to follow up with his doctor in 4 weeks. Sawyer's mom was a nurse, but she didn't hover over Ethan. She helped him by giving him advice. He asked her if she'd go with him to the doctor in 4 weeks, and she said that she would. What is your opinion about my recovery? Well, Ethan, you really should listen to whatever the doctor tells you. Since you went to the emergency room, your doctor should have had a nurse draw up some paperwork with instructions on what you needed to do. Simply follow those directions. If you have any needs, you need to let it be known. No one can help you if they don't know what you need. I don't believe in hovering over anyone and suffocating them with kindness. I believe in fresh air and freedom. Well, I've been following the paper instructions just fine. I retire when I don't feel good, and I've been lightly moving around. A concussion is nothing to play around with, but it doesn't last forever, and a full recovery is definitely possible. Just be careful. Wait 2 or 3 months before you go back to sports. Sawyer told me you are pretty intense with workouts and competing. I don't think that you should stop or slow down over a concussion, but I do believe that you should be more careful. Have you been talking to him? Ethan asked her. Yes, he says you are very intense with your workouts, that you like to pace yourself at a mean and unfair pace. Be careful, I repeat. When you go back to it, just be careful. Ethan returned to school a week after he moved into Sawyer's house. His teachers and all his friends missed him and hovered over him when he returned. He could not walk down the hall without at least 6 people wanting to talk with him, and every teacher he had wanted to bombard him with schoolwork. He voiced his concern about that to his school counselor, and she pulled a few strings and helped him out. Ethan's cell phone began to ring off the hook again. He didn't like that because it'd go off at night and wake both him and Sawyer. Sawyer had never been anything like that. He knew people received messages often, but Ethan got them all night. What do you have over you, Ethan? A love spell or something? Sawyer asked one night, nearly asleep. Everyone is all over you constantly. Ethan pondered Sawyer's remark. It's the sports, I swear. I excelled in all of them and took first place in every single one of them. I think the only sport I didn't play was tennis. Oh, Sawyer said before he started snoring. Ethan just smiled over that. He had his overhead lamp on, finishing his homework. He had it hooked to the railing of his bunk bed. Stayed up 2 extra hours every night, catching up on all of his classes. Calculus was the only challenge. Sawyer helped him in that department. The tutoring sessions for that continued once again. Ethan now definitely needed it. Sawyer didn't have a problem with it, especially since he had signed a contract agreeing to do it anyways. Plus, Ethan was his new best friend, so he rather benefited from the time. Ethan turned the lights off. Sawyer surprised him by saying his name. Opening his eyes, Ethan responded, Yeah? Did you know that I went on a date with Annabelle 2 days before you went to the hospital? Ethan's heart started beating rapidly in his chest. No, I didn't. Ethan eventually wanted to tell Sawyer how he felt about him. Ethan was in love with him, yet hadn't told him yet. Yeah, she came up to me one day after school and asked for my number. We talked for several days, and then she asked me out to the movies. We went and saw Final Fantasy Dream. I wanted to know what your opinion was. Do you think she's crazy and worth my time? Ethan carried a sour look on his face. He knew Sawyer wouldn't want to see it. Ethan pretended to snore to put an end to the conversation. He just looked up and said, Incredible, then went to sleep himself. Ethan laid sideways and thought for a moment. Sawyer likes a girl, a very pretty girl too. Ethan didn't know what he could do to compete with that. Closing his eyes, the tears started to pour. Several minutes later, he was out too. Ethan could not get the thought of Sawyer going out on a date with Annabelle out of his head to save his life. All throughout the day, and in most of his classes, he continually thought about it. Annabelle wasn't even popular. She was pretty and had a very beautiful smile, but Ethan had never even heard her in any social circle. The only reason he knew her was because he saw her around over the years growing up once or twice, and happened to see her name and picture one year in his yearbook. Aside from that, he knew nothing about her. He never saw Sawyer talking on the phone either. "Ethan, you need to get your head out of the clouds," his teacher snapped. "I see you daydreaming from here. Sit up and pay attention. I don't do all this talking and teaching for nothing. Either listen or go to the study hall." Ethan sat up and refocused. "All right, I'm back." Half the class laughed. Ethan just looked on innocently. Pretended to listen with little to no effort, but eventually his thoughts returned to Annabelle. Ethan didn't enjoy this breaking news about Annabelle at all. In fact, it was borderline torture. Ethan sat on the top bunk reading a book assigned to him for a book report due in 1 week. Sawyer walks in suddenly with his book bag, looked at Ethan and smiled. "Hey." Ethan pretended he didn't hear him. Sawyer tapped him on the leg. Ethan looked up. "Yeah?" "I said hey," Sawyer declared. "And?" Ethan remarked. "Excuse me? What's with the attitude all of a sudden?" "Just leave me alone, okay? I'm tired and don't feel good. I'm up to my eyeballs in schoolwork, and I need some much-needed space." "Well, excuse me for acknowledging you. I won't do it again." He sat on his bottom bunk and laid down to take a nap. His day had been long and exhausting. Ethan could hear him snore from up top and had to fight the urge to smile. He really was funny and had the worst temper, too. He tried to focus on his homework, but Sawyer's words kept echoing into his ears. "I won't do it again." I hope I didn't ruin anything between Sawyer and I, Ethan thought to himself. Went back to his book, only slightly into it. Sawyer had woken Ethan up turning on the television. It was now 8:45 p.m. Ethan looked at the TV for a second. Then he raised his voice for Sawyer to hear. "Can you turn that off, please? I need to get some sleep." Sawyer snatched the remote control and pushed the off button. Then he got up and faced Ethan. "Who do you think you're talking to like that?" Ethan had his back towards Sawyer. He didn't even acknowledge him. He took the remote control and turned the TV back on and turned it all the way up. That did it. Ethan turned around in rage and sat up. "Give me that remote." Ethan lunged towards Sawyer, and instead of trying to take the remote, Ethan socked the hell out of Sawyer's jaw. Sawyer backed up and away from Ethan before he got hurt. Then he took the remote, still in his hand, and he chucked it as hard as he could at Ethan. It got him right in the face. Miraculously, Ethan sobered up. He calmed down and searched for the remote. He took it and cut the TV down. "You are just like my mom. You are disrespectful and disgusting. Either help me or get the fuck out of my life. I'm still sick and I need respect. Respect and space. And privacy. Peace and quiet would be nice. Now shut the fuck up and let me get some sleep." He then threw the remote into the wall with his athletic arm. Sawyer watched it as it shattered into 4 pieces. Angry and full of rage, he ran up to the bedroom to report Ethan to his parents. He wanted Ethan out before he committed any murder. He rode the horse his parents owned up to the side of the front yard and back, trying to calm down. Miss Lancelot told Sawyer to give Ethan a break. "The boy is still sick. What you did was unfair to him." Sawyer was red after Ethan had punched him. All he wanted to do was break Ethan's neck. He was severely angry at him. "Nobody hits me like that." The horse he was on was getting agitated. Sawyer was being way too rough. Several minutes later, he got off and let the horse roam free. The wind started to blow rather hard. I guess I needed to go in and do my homework. The world doesn't stop just because he's sick and in a bad mood. I'm not staying out of my bedroom forever either. That room is just as much mine as it is his. Really, it's not even his. He marched back up to the house and was ready to battle again with Ethan, should he start another fight with his attitude. Ironically, he was sound asleep when Sawyer walked back into his room, found the remote still on the floor in pieces. Sawyer scooped them up and sat down trying to focus. He looked at the pieces and did his best to put the remote back together. There was no use. Sawyer had broken it. He'd already told his mom, and she was on her way to the store to get another one. Obviously, she felt sorry for Ethan because she was willing to rush to Best Buy and have the remote placed as soon as possible to keep the peace between Ethan. Sawyer. Sawyer found it comical and ridiculous. He also didn't think it was going to work. He was a guy with a nasty temper and very good at holding grudges and harboring unforgiveness. It didn't look good for Ethan. Yet Ethan slept like a baby, as if he didn't even care. Sawyer sat down and did his homework. Afterwards, he went to bed and decided to let Ethan leave his mind. He had a lot to do the next day, and Ethan wasn't even on his list of priorities. Sawyer was still tickled at Ethan that he went to school an hour early to avoid having to talk to or acknowledge him. Normally he knew Ethan got up at 6 to jog a mile, but that isn't happening anymore since he's now recovering from a concussion. Now Ethan is sleeping until 7, and Sawyer took it as an opportunity to bail early to avoid him. He knew he'd have to face him sooner or later, but he was way too angry to do it now. Wished Ethan would make up with his parents and just go back home. Return to being Ethan again like before. He hated the role he now played because of Ethan. It was like they were brothers now or something. He didn't think too fondly of that, now that Ethan was sludged him in the face. Everything he thought of that he wanted to get Ethan back somehow. Not that it mattered at all to Sawyer, but it certainly looked as though he now hated him, and that it was something similar or permanent. He got up and got dressed. He was late for school, having overslept. Normally Sawyer would wake him up. He must still be mad at me. He knew Sawyer was good at holding grudges. Him and Sawyer had plenty of fights over the course of their friendship, and Ethan had to, more than once, ask for his forgiveness. Feared he'd be faced with doing that again, especially if he wanted any chance with him romantically. He couldn't let that deter his focus at the moment, though. He was late for school, and still had to recover from his concussion. He was just about caught up with his schoolwork. Still had a few more assignments to turn in. His teachers were being lenient towards him, but it'd only go so far. He couldn't let Sawyer get in the way of that. His primary focus had to be his recovery and school, even if it meant he and Sawyer part for a while. He tried not to think about it. Instead, he poured himself into getting ready for school and seeing what the day had to bring. Ethan had a bunch of people hanging out with him after school when he spotted Sawyer walking across the parking lot alone. Sawyer looked as though he were in a hurry. Ethan told his friend Lance to run after and stop Sawyer. Lance went running after him and caught him just as he was about to step into his Jeep. Sawyer was slightly unnerved and gave out a look of warning to Lance. Then Lance pointed to Ethan. Sawyer looked at what Lance was pointing at, and fury rebirthed in Sawyer's face, and he hurriedly climbed into his Jeep. Ethan took off for him. When Sawyer had his car cranked and his gear put in drive, he looked up to see Ethan standing in front of the Jeep. Sawyer shook his head. Ethan understood what that meant, but he didn't budge. He motioned towards his heart, signed that it was breaking. He ran his fingers down Sawyer's Jeep, so Sawyer couldn't drive away. Sawyer already had his window down. He got inches towards the door when Sawyer punched out at Ethan. Ethan cowered, but only slightly. Do you think it's okay to punch somebody in the face one day, and then love on them the next, Ethan? I don't think so. I'm not your punching bag, and I'm not someone you take out your frustrations on. Sawyer, I was on my medication. I'm still sick. You turned the TV up too loud. You literally busted my eardrums. Should you really expect anything less? You're lucky I didn't beat your ass. Anybody else would have. That's why you need to be in your own room, at your own house, where nobody can do that to you. Don't blame the medicine. You're just flipping out on me all day. I got tired of it. I'm still sick, Sawyer. Then until you get better, my suggestion to you is to stay away from me. Sawyer floored the gas pedal, his side view mirror hitting Ethan and knocking him off his feet. 6 people went rushing over to help Ethan. That bastard, Helene screeched. He needs his ass beat. Nathan hissed. No, it's my fault. I should have left him alone. I hit him yesterday, and he's still pissed off about it. Allowing his friends to help him up. Just leave me alone. You need to stay away from him, Ethan. He's crazy. The whole school thinks so. I know the whole school hates him, Nathan. Let's just drop it and go to the varsity. I need to take my medicine. Ethan and his friends left the school parking lot and went to the varsity to hang out. Ethan thought about what Sawyer said the entire time that he hung out at the varsity. His friends could tell he was a million miles away. What puzzled him the most was the fact that deep down Sawyer was right. Ethan had been kind of cruel to him, and he had been doing it on purpose. He had done it because Sawyer had gone out on a date with Annabelle. He definitely hated it. He thought about how he could fix the matter with him. Knew he had to take the responsibility for his part. Maybe Sawyer shouldn't almost hit him with his Jeep, but Ethan had no right standing in front of it either. Sawyer was very right in the world to drive out of the school parking lot when he feels like it. Ethan knew he had no right barging in on Sawyer like he did. In fact, he had been doing that a lot. From the time he called the vice principal to hold Sawyer accountable for his contract, to the times he ran after Sawyer when he was mad at him. Now Ethan was barging in on him at home by living with him, and even had the audacity to hit him. Ethan felt like he was a terrible person. I don't know how Sawyer does it, he said out loud. Ethan stayed at the varsity until 7 p.m. He had a salad and something to drink. His friends kept him some company. Ethan himself did his best to keep Sawyer off the subject of conversation. He'd almost forgotten anything had happened between them until he'd forgotten himself and headed in the direction of his house instead of Sawyer's. Whoa, I live at Sawyer's now, Ethan said, making a U-turn. Ethan drove to Sawyer's house a little nervous. He couldn't believe he still had feelings for him, even after what had happened. It had been almost 3 months since he and Sawyer had gotten close, and one heck of a ride. Even Ethan got back to the house. Everyone was asleep. All the lights were off, and there wasn't a single sound. When Ethan walked into his room, he saw Sawyer laying on his back. Ethan proceeded to change into the night clothes. When he was finished, Sawyer's voice rang through the room. I didn't mean to knock you down earlier. I just didn't feel comfortable in front of all of your friends. Ethan turned and faced Sawyer. Noah was thinking about things, and eventually concluded that it was my fault. I'd stood in front of your car like an idiot, and I shouldn't have. I forced you to do a lot of stuff that you shouldn't. I'm sorry. Sawyer weighed Ethan's words. Well, still, I kept thinking about your concussion. The image of you falling down because of me kept replaying in my mind, and it was torturing me like mad crazy. I can't believe how much I love you, Ethan. Tears ran down Sawyer's face. Ethan was definitely stunned. Literally no words came out. Sawyer rolled over on his side and just went to sleep. Ethan hardly went to sleep that night. His words literally pierced his heart. Ethan had never heard the L word from Sawyer before. Was it the accident? Did something awaken him? Ethan didn't know. Maybe Sawyer was reminded of Ethan's accident somehow when he knocked him over with his Jeep. Either way, Ethan saw Sawyer's love for him, and his resolve was once again strengthened. Ethan woke up the next morning and didn't find Sawyer in his bed. He sort of sighed and had a sloping spirit. I guess things are back to the way they were before. He was disappointed. However, he didn't know for sure things were still bad between him and Sawyer. He just knew Sawyer was still getting up early in the morning, possibly to avoid him. Ethan didn't see him when he went to school, even looked for him during lunch and in the parking lot at the end of the day. He was a little worried, but tried not to say anything. He decided to text him, saying, I haven't seen you in school all day. Are you okay? When he hit send, Ethan went home hoping to see Sawyer there. He did not see Sawyer when he got home. He was not in his room, and Ethan near panicked. He asked his mom where Sawyer was, and she told him that he asked for the day off from school and said that he was going to the lake for something, or for some R&R. Ethan knew exactly where that was and instantly took off, and slowly made his way to the bridge. He'd already parked his car. The sky was cloudy, and the wind was really strong. Ethan spotted Sawyer in the middle of the bridge with his hands folded. He was looking out over the water, as he always did. Suddenly, he was nervous. Walked over slowly to where Sawyer stood. He inched closer and closer, finally side by side with Sawyer. Ethan put his arm around Sawyer's middle. Sawyer actually moved so that he could. Ethan rested his chin on Sawyer's shoulder. Sawyer, I love you. Sawyer nodded. I love you too, Ethan. Ethan rested his face on Sawyer's back. Sawyer never pushed him away. They stayed that way for a long time. It was going on 9 o'clock, and Ethan and Sawyer were still cuddling up on the bridge. Neither had really spoken about what had happened, and Ethan knew it would have happened eventually. It's getting dark, Ethan. I think we should be heading back soon. Mom wouldn't really care, but I have an assignment to finish up. I gotta keep my grades up. Are you going back to school early in the morning? I'm not sure yet, Ethan. What is that supposed to mean? Have we not made up? Have we not confessed something deep to each other? Yes, Ethan, we have, but I'm still mad at you. You punched me in the face. I didn't appreciate you hitting me like that, and I'm not moving forward going through something like that again. What we have is far from stable. You go back to school tomorrow and continue to avoid me, and then what? I don't know. Ethan jerked himself away from Sawyer and marched straight back to his convertible. He got to his car and hopped over the door, fiercely cranked his car. He screeched his way out of there and onto the road. Sawyer just watched him with raised eyebrows. Sawyer got home about 20 minutes after Ethan did. Walked in and expected Ethan to be asleep, but he was wide awake. He had the light off, but he was laying on his back. Sawyer knew he usually would be awake when he laid that way. Sawyer changed clothes and put on boxers and a t-shirt. He looked Ethan's way, but didn't say anything. When Sawyer sat down on his bed, he heard Ethan speak. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to walk out on you and end things that way. Paused for a moment, then replied, It's okay. I know you are the sensitive type. I love you, Sawyer. I love you too, Ethan. Both went to sleep minutes later. Ethan had a good feeling in his heart the next morning. He felt good. Sawyer woke up at 6 and left at 7. When Ethan went through his morning routine, he could not find Sawyer anywhere. He tried to keep him out of his mind. He knew if he clung to him too much, he would wind up disappointed yet again. Ethan found himself overly sensitive when it came to this. Just mentioning Sawyer brought out a vulnerable and a secret Ethan that no one else knew. Sawyer didn't know much about him. Ethan still thought Sawyer was straight. Only time would tell where that relationship went. A week passed by, and Ethan allowed Sawyer to breathe. He let him get up early in the morning without saying anything about it. He didn't look for Sawyer in the hallway. He didn't say too much while they were in the bedroom at the same time. Ethan truly tried to give Sawyer his space. It started to work. He approached Ethan the following week and asked if he wanted to go camping. Ethan agreed enthusiastically. I haven't been in a long time, and I kind of want to get away for the weekend, but I don't want to be alone. You won't be alone. I'll be there. Sawyer smiled at Ethan, lighting his whole face. And Ethan had everything packed and ready to go. Ethan didn't do much because Sawyer had all the supplies. The destination was Destin Woods. It was a very nice wooded area in the middle of the state, about 3 hours away from his house. Sawyer was taking his Jeep and going and doing all the driving. The highway they drove down became very woodsy around and about them. It looked nice and serene. I can't believe I haven't been camping on my own before, Ethan astonished. Well, once we do, you'll be able to say you have. They drove on until it got kind of dark. Oh my God, it's going to be awfully scary when we set up the tent. We'll have each other, Sawyer smiled. Aw, thanks, Sawyer. You know, you really are a lot of fun to be around. Don't ever sell yourself short. People love you for a reason. Ethan just smiled on. The place that they chose was in the middle of the woods where no one else went near. Sawyer grabbed the tent and began to put it up together. Ethan grabbed the sleeping bags and gasoline, cooler, and put everything together and got everything ready to use. Ethan was amazed at Sawyer's work by the time he was through. The tent was literally the size of a small house. Oh my God, Ethan joyfully rang out. He walked inside and looked around as if he were in a magical land or something. Sawyer looked at him like he was crazy. It's just a tent. No, it's not. It's an amazing structure all on its own. Well, maybe it's because I've seen it before. This is your first time? Yeah, pretty much. They lugged their sleeping bag and other overnight essentials into the tent. Then they shut the door and placed their sleeping bags inside, beside each other. It's going to be cold tonight, and even though I believe our heater will help, it may not be enough. We should sleep close enough together tonight in case we need body heat. Yeah, I know. I'm very cold-natured, too. They wrapped up into their sleeping bags and faced each other. So, Sawyer said. So, Ethan replied. Didn't you want to talk to me about us, Ethan? Ethan's heart started beating fast. Yeah, I did, looking more serious now. Well, I am all ears now, Sawyer said. Looked at Sawyer, saw how beautiful and kind he was. Well, I have to be honest here. I find myself missing you when you are not there. Ever since our fight, I have felt as though I have lost you somehow. You've withdrawn from me. I don't care that you do it to others, just not to me. I love you. Ethan lunged forward and caught Sawyer in a kiss. His lips went between Sawyer's. Ethan's lips were strong. They held Sawyer's with a fervent passion. When he finished, he backed away a little. Sawyer seemed disappointed when he did so. Why did you back away? Sawyer asked. Ethan smiled. I'm not used to kissing guys. Sawyer smiled. Well, I love you too, Ethan. But? Ethan asked. But nothing. You just need to learn that if someone is important to you, you treat them with respect and cherish them. It's hard. I am who I am. Yeah, but so am I, Ethan. I don't do drama. We won't last if it continues, Sawyer added. I couldn't bear to see that. Then don't, Ethan. What Sawyer said went over Ethan's head. It worried Sawyer. As smart as Ethan was, occasionally he could be really dense. Ethan woke up and took a small walk along the lake that resided in the Destin woods. It was small, but incredibly beautiful. Ethan walked along the edge. He thought about last night, didn't know what came over him. Grabbed Sawyer like that and just kissed him. He wasn't officially in a relationship with him yet, but he believed things were heading in the right direction. He started to miss Sawyer, so he headed back to the tent. Ethan entered the tent and got back into his sleeping bag. When he laid sideways in his sleeping bag, he looked at Sawyer. Just then, he opened his eyes. He and Ethan made eye contact. Ethan leaned over and kissed Sawyer on the lips. He held Sawyer's kiss for a long moment. Then he went to kiss his eyes. Sawyer closed them so he could. Ethan kissed both eyes. Then he went back to Sawyer's lips. The back of his fingertips caressed Sawyer's cheeks. I love you. Sawyer whispered it back. Ethan's eyes released a few tears. Sawyer didn't seem to notice. He cradled Sawyer in his arms. Ethan kissed Sawyer all over his face. I love you so much. Sawyer just gave in to Ethan. I have never met anyone so beautiful and so loving in all of my life, Ethan continued. I love your hair, your eyes, and the feel of your lips to mine. Ethan pulled Sawyer closer to him and squeezed him hard. He took Sawyer again with his lips, this time sticking his tongue deep into Sawyer's mouth. He pulled Sawyer on top of him and continued the kiss. Sawyer would hardly breathe. Ethan was so rough with it. They rolled. Ethan pulled himself out of his sleeping bag and went into Sawyer's. Sawyer cried out. Ethan went for his stomach and nearly died upon feeling how soft it was. And stop, please. I can't breathe. I'm still new at this. Let's go slowly. Ethan just kissed Sawyer, then coaxingly replied, Okay, I just want you so badly. He kissed him again, then slowly pulled away and out of Sawyer's sleeping bag. I love you. He cradled Sawyer in his arms. I love you so much. He continued to kiss Sawyer's face, kissed it until Sawyer fell asleep on his arms. In the morning, they finally pulled themselves out of the tent, late into the evening, and grabbed some marshmallows, made a fire, and dangled 12 until they were black and creamy in the middle. Damn, Ethan said. These are good. They were finally tearing into them. Sawyer smiled. They really are. Dad makes s'mores using chocolate and graham crackers when we go camping. Ethan smiled. Yeah, my dad doesn't camp. In fact, I don't think Dad does anything except for numbers and business. Well, my dad hasn't taken me camping in years. When they finished eating, they made their way to the lake. At first, it was just to hang out. Sawyer said that he loved standing over the water, enjoyed feeling the water vapors in the air, and the sparkle of light dancing off of the sky. But then he looked at Ethan, looking devilish. Want to go swimming? He smiled from ear to ear. Sawyer, I didn't bring any swimming trunks. Just go in your briefs. It's not that cold. Ethan laughed so hard it scared Sawyer. He then stripped off his shirt, then took his shoes, socks, and shorts off. I'm going in. You can stay out here if you want. Sawyer jumped into the water. Ethan watched as he splashed around and swam about. Are you coming in? Ethan looked at him. All right, I'm coming in. stripped down to his briefs, then jumped into the water. Sawyer watched him swim the lake more fluidly than any fish he'd ever seen. Good God, Ethan, is there anything that you can't do? He just laughed. Swam up close to Sawyer. Tennis. I can't play tennis to save my life. Wow, Ethan, isn't that invincible after all? They were now nose to nose. No, I'm invincible, Ethan smiled. Sawyer smiled more. Ethan laughed. Sawyer, are you going to just kiss me? Sawyer looked dumbfounded for a second. Yeah. Sawyer kissed Ethan. His movements was slow and gentle. Unlike Ethan, who loved to be rough. Sawyer's bottom lip went over Ethan's. He withdrew. Ethan ducked underwater suddenly. Sawyer had no idea what he was doing until he felt something touch him underwater. It's better left unsaid concerning what happened next. But needless to say, Sawyer was screaming for mercy by the time Ethan was through. They got out of the water in a flash. Do you think you can do just anything you want to me, Ethan? Getting in his face and pushing him. Just how inexperienced are you? I'll show you inexperienced. Sawyer grabbed Ethan and his untold story and squeezed as hard as he could. Ethan went to his knees. Then Ethan grabbed his wrist. Only intensified Sawyer's resolve. Sawyer grabbed him by his hair and jerked his head back and kissed his neck. Then Ethan landed on his back with Sawyer on top, attacking in the most romantic and savage way a boy his age could. The night ended, and the moment had ceased. They were no longer two virgins in Destin Woods. Into the tent, feeling violated and beaten. Climbing into their sleeping bags, both boys shivered against the heater, waiting for their bodies to dry. Neither spoke to the other. When an hour passed, Ethan finally looked at Sawyer. Are you mad at me? Sawyer just looked at him. No, Ethan, I'm just sore as hell. I never dreamed my first time would be like that. Oh, it wasn't that bad. Speak for yourself. I have never felt like that ever in my life. You brought something out of me that I didn't even know was there. You weren't complaining too much while I was doing it. Neither did you, punk. I'm used to feeling sore and beaten. I work out and play sports. You only sprinkle yourself in it. I feel sorry for you in the morning. Sawyer looked at Ethan seriously. If I'm too sore tomorrow, then I will never do it again. Ethan closed his mouth at that one. Both boys went to sleep several minutes later. Sunday morning arrived way too soon. Sawyer was already up cooking breakfast. He still looked awful from the night before, but felt better since he had gotten a full night's sleep. He was cooking eggs and bacon in the mini cooker his mom had given him. When he finished, Ethan was coming out of his tent. He looked better than Sawyer did. You hungry? Ethan looked at him. Yeah, a little, he confessed. Sawyer placed Ethan's food on a paper plate. Then he poured Ethan a cup of Dr. Pepper. He handed Ethan his portion and then smiled. Gosh, Sawyer, thanks. This is a lot of food. He smiled. They sat on the chairs they brought and ate in peace and silence. Ethan looked at Sawyer. Sawyer, I love you. Sawyer looked at Ethan. I love you too. They looked at each other and smiled, then finished their breakfast. Ethan and Sawyer made it back to Sawyer's house from their camping trip Sunday afternoon. Ethan was living with Sawyer after having moved out of his parents' house. Ethan started receiving calls and texts from his home shortly before their camping trip. Ethan had been keeping it a secret. He was afraid if he told Sawyer or Mrs. and Mrs. Lancelot, they would make him leave. He didn't want to make up with his parents, even though his parents were reaching out and trying. Ethan was their only child. It was only natural that they'd eventually want to reach back out and save the relationship they had with their only child. He was precious to them. But unfortunately, as precious as he was, Ethan simply wasn't ready. He loved his parents, but he loved Sawyer too, and wanted to see where that was going to go. He knew if he made up with his parents, they would try to make him move back and try to control his life again. Ethan enjoyed his newfound freedom. It was fresh air. He didn't want to go back. The phone vibrated after Sawyer pulled into the driveway. Ethan looked to find yet another text message from his mother. Ethan, I miss you. I'm sorry for what I said. Please forgive me. Ethan hit clear to remove the unwanted notification. Then he got out of the Jeep and helped Sawyer unpack and return everything to where it belonged. When they finished, back in their room, Sawyer asked Ethan to lay on the bottom bunk with him. They didn't cuddle or anything, but Sawyer relaxed while Ethan lay there awkwardly. What am I doing down here? He asked Sawyer. I just thought you would be happier if you were down here with me. Did you have any homework you had to finish or something? No, I didn't, Ethan replied. Ethan cuddled close to Sawyer while Sawyer took out a book and began to read. Sawyer put his right arm behind Ethan's back, and then Ethan cuddled Sawyer's side. In moments, he was asleep. Sawyer read for a little while before he felt like taking a nap. The camping trip was exhausting for both of them, and neither had slept that well. Given that they had done and been through, Sawyer put down his book and held Ethan with both arms and went to sleep. Ethan woke up to find himself in Sawyer's arms. Oh, how he wanted to keep going. However, Ethan was hot. He wriggled out of Sawyer's arms slowly as not to wake him, then decided to get some air. He walked outside, folded his arms. Sawyer's house looked beautiful at night. His land stretched out pretty far, and you could see the green grass from the streetlights sway back and forth in the wind. Ethan couldn't believe how happy he was. He thought about his school, his parents, and his future. What would happen should he and Sawyer become a couple? How would that affect his college life and his future? Shoot, how would it affect his high school life? People already disliked him for being Sawyer's friend. He had no idea how much worse it could be should he become Sawyer's boyfriend. He wasn't the type to hide things, so he was sure he could tell the truth about him and Sawyer. Sawyer would have more of a problem than he would about the relationship being in the light. Ethan always lived his life in the truth. If he ended up gay and in the relationship with another guy, he couldn't hide it, but Sawyer probably would. Ethan sat down in the rocking chair on Sawyer's front porch. Ethan could tell that he was still sore from his camping trip. Him and Sawyer had been very rough with each other, making love and breaking their virginities. They hadn't gone easy on each other. Well, it was Sawyer's fault, and pride. Sawyer had refused to allow Ethan to be rough with him, even though it was in Ethan's nature. You're supposed to follow your heart when you make love, not your head as Sawyer had done. Sawyer is gentle and slow by nature. Ethan wasn't. That's probably why their first time had been so rough. Sawyer hadn't yet accepted who he was in the relationship. Ethan turned around and went back inside so he can get more sleep. He'd be up and getting ready for school in less than 7 more hours, and he needed to get some rest to be energized and ready for tomorrow. Ethan opened his eyes. Dang, I'm still sore. Just how long is this going to last? He hopped out of his bed and climbed down the ladder to the floor. Sawyer was still asleep. Ethan was touched that Sawyer wasn't getting up early anymore for school, only to avoid him. After their last fight, Ethan had been sure Sawyer was done with him. He certainly wasn't going to test the stars by getting into another one. Decided to just go take a shower and get ready for school. Sawyer woke up at 7:30, getting to his feet. Sawyer checked to make sure Ethan wasn't still asleep. He saw Ethan had already gotten up and left. Sawyer went and then showered. He noticed he was still sore from his camping trip. Nothing intense today during PE, Sawyer mentally told himself. He showered, changed into some school clothes. Once he was ready for school, he left and made his way to the Jeep. On his windshield wiper, Sawyer left a note. Meet me at the bleachers of the football field at lunch. I would like to spend some time with you. I love you. Sawyer sighed. He hated having going back to school and separating himself from Ethan. The camping trip he went on ended way too soon. Reluctantly, Sawyer got into his Jeep and made his way to school. He hoped to see Ethan there. Ethan sat with his friends at lunch, and everybody was itching to say something to him. Ethan himself was tired and a little over school, especially after the weekend he had with Sawyer. Jason Reeved clapped him on his back, and Ethan tensed up. Sorry, buddy. I didn't know you were sore. Are you okay? You didn't get into a fight or anything, did you? No, I went camping and did a lot of physical activity. I haven't gotten over it yet. Vicky looked at Ethan's neck. Yeah, I see the hickey on your neck. We know what kind of physical activity you're referring to. Everyone laughed. Ethan himself turned red from the embarrassment. Lance commented, Ethan, I didn't know you were seeing someone. Ethan just responded, It was some random girl a friend of mine introduced me to. It didn't go very far. I let her kiss me a little. That's all. Everyone laughed and commented. Ethan stayed around for a few more minutes and then left with Sawyer on his mind. I have to go to the library, guys, Ethan said, standing up. I have a due book report tomorrow. I will see you guys later. Everyone waved their byes to Ethan, and he made a quick retreat out of the cafeteria. Right about that time, he did that. I was already patiently waiting for him under the bleachers. Sawyer caught a glimpse of Ethan as the bell rang, indicating lunch was halfway over. Sawyer smiled as Ethan came into closer view. You could tell Ethan had rushed over. I was starting to worry, Ethan. What took you so long? Ethan walked closer and moved slowly toward Sawyer. He went in to touch him, but Sawyer recoiled. Ethan's heart dropped. Come on. I wanted to give you a hug and a kiss. Ethan, we're at school. I can't just do that stuff with you here. Ethan just looked hurt. Well, you don't have to shrug me off like that. I mean, let me down gently or something. You came at me all of a sudden. I wasn't really expecting it. Ethan nodded, indicating it was fine. Ethan sat down, and Sawyer sat down as well. Sorry for keeping you. I couldn't shake my friends off right away. Ethan saw Sawyer's annoyance over that, but Sawyer shrugged it off. I wish they'd just give you a break. It's not like any of them are close to you. I don't get what they all get from swarming you. Nobody gets personal time with you. I don't know myself. I have a hunch it's the sports, and maybe the good looks, but that's all I can gather. Sawyer just nodded. Well, I got your letter saying you wanted to meet me here, so I'm here. Ethan couldn't hide his annoyance. Yes, well, I was hoping we could be affectionate with each other and enjoy the love we have. I shared last week, but apparently that's not going to happen. Ethan looked the other way as he said it. Sawyer raised his eyebrows. Well, I don't like ruining my reputation, or making things worse for me while I'm a student at this school. Obviously. Sawyer just looked at Ethan. He felt like leaving, seeing how Ethan was disappointed in him. Well, if you don't have anything else to say, I'm just going to leave. I need to study anyways. I'm behind because of the camping trip. Sawyer was standing up, wiping the dust from his jeans. Yeah, I have nothing else to say. Ethan got up too. Okay, I will see you at home then. Yeah, you will. Sawyer went to leave when Ethan caught him by the arm. I love you, Sawyer, he said in a low voice. Sawyer gave Ethan a look of warning. I love you too, Ethan. Then he walked slowly away, gently pulling his arm free from Ethan. Ethan drove up beside Sawyer's car and parked. He got out with his book bag and made his way inside. His phone vibrated. He looked at the notification. Ethan, this is your mom. I miss you. Text me back and let me know that you are okay. Ethan rolled his eyes and just went inside. Ethan walked into his room, saw Sawyer asleep. Ethan gently placed his book bag down in the corner and slowly walked over to Sawyer. He leaned over him, kissed Sawyer on the cheek, shook him. Sawyer stirred, questioned himself, then looked at Ethan. I'm home, sweetheart, Ethan said as he kissed Sawyer. Sawyer just let him. Ethan pushed Sawyer's head against the pillow with him above, kissing him all the while. He stopped only to breathe, kissing Sawyer yet again. Eventually, stopped for another second, looking into Sawyer's eyes. He said, I love you. Sawyer just looked back at Ethan. I love you too, Ethan. Ethan pulled over Sawyer's covers off of him and climbed underneath beside him. Then he scooted closer to Sawyer's side and cradled him in his arms. Sawyer rested his head on Ethan's chest and rested as his arms went around his middle. In minutes, Sawyer was asleep, and Ethan was thanking his lucky stars. School had not come between him and Sawyer. Ethan and Sawyer woke up for dinner with Mrs. Lancelot knocking hard on the door. Dinner time, boys. Ethan and Sawyer both flew up like they had been caught committing a crime. Oh my God, Sawyer, can you imagine what would have happened if we not locked that damn door? It's okay, Ethan. It's okay. He caressed Ethan's face. I was already on the defense. Don't worry too much. He kissed Ethan's mouth. He felt Ethan's lip tremble. Shh, I'm here. I'm here. He cradled Ethan in his arms. Ethan just breathed into Sawyer and inhaled the scent of newly bought clothes straight from the rack. Sawyer pulled away. Come on, Ethan. Let's go eat dinner. He kissed Ethan one final time before he and Ethan got up to eat. Ethan screamed, I can't, Sawyer. Still this horse before I fall off of it. Sawyer bent over laughing. The horse pranced off with Ethan screaming like a little girl. My stomach. Oh God, my stomach. Sawyer doubled over laughing, cradling his stomach. Ethan could still be heard screaming, going down the hill, clutching the horse as tightly as humanly possible. Sawyer eventually went after them. They had to get some sleep for school the next day. Ethan refused to cuddle with Sawyer that night, on account of the horse's ordeal. Sawyer went to sleep that night with a smile that refused to leave his face. Ethan wasn't really angry, but thoughts did go to his past concussion and how he had just recovered. He didn't think Sawyer was very nice for putting him in such a situation that could have potentially placed him back in the hospital. He went to sleep, hoping Sawyer learned his lesson. He was smiling the next morning, too. Ethan noticed and did his best to conceal his annoyance. Ethan did his best to head to school and to focus on the day ahead. He remembered homework that he had and assignments that he needed to complete it and focus on. Sawyer could be seen behind him driving to school. Ethan looked through his rearview mirror and saw Sawyer was just staring at him. Ethan showed Sawyer his middle finger. Sawyer just laughed so hard his Jeep nearly hit the median. Ethan smiled back despite himself, then focused on his driving before Sawyer got them both a ticket. Ethan's phone vibrated. He pulled it out briefly to see that it was a text from his mother. "Happy Valentine's Day," it read. Ethan couldn't believe he'd forgotten about Valentine's Day. Grabbing his book bag, Ethan made his way up to the school building from the parking lot. "I've got to do something for Sawyer," he thought. He had no idea what, though. Sawyer walked to the bleachers, then maneuvered his way to the back. Ethan was standing there with his arms crossed. "Ethan, these notes have to stop." Ethan smiled from ear to ear. "Happy Valentine's Day." Ethan pointed to other end of the bleachers in field. Sawyer looked up and had cut one of his classes and had gone to the store and bought Sawyer a bunch of Valentine's Day candy and a black teddy bear. Then, as a surprise, Sawyer also found a PS4 game he had been wanting and nearly squealed like a girl. Ethan hid his smile. Sawyer looked at Ethan and then smiled. "Thank you." He went over and kissed Ethan on the lips. Ethan didn't push anything on Sawyer, just allowed him to bask in his joy. The moment ended too soon. Ethan and Sawyer had to return to class before they got in trouble. Sawyer had a handful of items in his hands as he made his way back to his locker to place everything Ethan had bought him within. With a big smile, Sawyer closed his locker and decided to finish his day on a positive note. Ethan received his report card, all A's. He managed to squeeze a 90 out of calculus. "Sawyer, I received a 90 in calculus," Ethan declared, bursting into the room. Sawyer jumped from his bed to look at Ethan's report card. "I'm so proud of you. You took my tutoring to heart." Sawyer kissed Ethan and held it for a brief moment. Don't you do that to me. You know how I get." Ethan was about to take Sawyer and throw him onto the bed. "Not so fast. We still have another session scheduled, and I believe it's right now," Sawyer said, smiling from ear to ear. Ethan just rolled his eyes with sheer pleasure and looked up at the ceiling with cheerful reluctance. "Fine, lead the way." Sawyer grabbed the calculus book and grabbed Ethan's hand, pulled him to the bed where they began over the next chapter. Ethan walked up to the door of his mother's house and hesitated before knocking. The endless text messages finally paid off for Mrs. Fester. Ethan was feeling bad about ignoring her for so long, thought to himself that if he had kids, he wouldn't want them doing it to him. He rung the doorbell. The door opened, and Mrs. Fester popped out from the other side. When she looked at Ethan, her eyes filled with tears. She moved forward quickly and embraced him. Ethan felt so awkward upon his mother's embrace, but let her do it anyway. After several minutes, she let him go and asked to come in. They made their way to the living room, and Ethan sat down on the sofa near his mom and waited for her to start the conversation. "Ethan, I am so sorry for the things that I said. Can you please find it in your heart to forgive me?" "Yes, Mom, I forgive you." His mom beamed and cried with joy. Ethan knew his mom loved him dearly. Ethan looked at his mom for a moment, then got serious. "I don't want to leave Sawyer's house. He offered a lot of academic help, and I've even got someone I can connect to on a serious level. It is all right if I stay there for the remainder of the year." Miss Fester thought for a moment. "Yes, Ethan, you can stay. I was just mainly concerned about our relationship. I do love you. You're my only child." "I understand. I love you, Mom." Her and Ethan spent the afternoon catching up, and Ethan informed her of his progress academically and otherwise. His mom requested that Ethan pay for a weekly visit to let her know how things are going with him. He agreed. After he had spent time with his mother, Ethan decided to call it an afternoon. He kissed his mom goodbye and told her he'd be in touch. His mom closed the door, feeling a lot better over the relationship she had with her son. Ethan pulled up to Sawyer's driveway and parked his car. He felt much better having repaired the relationship with his mom. Sawyer noticed a difference, too, when Ethan entered the room. "What's wrong with you?" he asked, looking away from his video game. "What do you mean?" "Well, normally you move around and act like you have more pep in your step or something. You look almost depressed." Ethan looked at Sawyer, shrugged, then said, "I made up with my mom today." Sawyer just smiled. "How is that a bad thing?" Ethan sat down on the edge of Sawyer's bed. "It's not. She just made me feel bad with all her crying and hugging. I'm happy her and I are back to the way that we were before, but the whole experience just left me exhausted." He nodded. "Yeah, Mom does me the same way. Maybe that's how women are in general," Ethan said, giggling. Sawyer smiled at that one. "Maybe you're right." Ethan got up and climbed up to his bunk bed. "Does that mean that you are leaving?" Sawyer asked. "I asked my mom if I could stay. She said that I could. I don't think my mom and dad will be too happy with you continuing to live here if you and your parents have made up." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "Why do you say that?" "Because it will feel like you are intruding somehow." Already overheard one of their conversations. They don't really intend to let you stay once you've made up with your parents. It kind of makes sense, though. They aren't your parents. Ethan felt like he just got slapped in the face. "Sawyer, you can be a real bastard sometimes, you know that? Veronica was right about you. You are a blunt and sensitive freak. Do you know how much that just hurt my feelings?" Sawyer saw red. "Excuse me?" He hopped off of his bed. "I'm just telling you the truth. Telling you before you find out some other way. My mom is a nurse at her school, and your mom is on the school board. Word travels, and eventually they are bound to find out. So before you start calling people bastards, Ethan, get to the bottom of the situation first." Sawyer stormed out of his room and slammed the door in the process. Ethan was chasing Sawyer down the front road. Sawyer refused to slow down, and Ethan had to literally run to catch up. "I'm sorry. It was the way that you said it. It just seemed like you didn't care at all as to whether we got separated or not." He grabbed Sawyer's wrist. Sawyer turned around and suddenly jerked his arm free of Sawyer's grasp. "I don't care," he stated viciously. He was right in Ethan's face. "You don't care? After all I've done for you? After all we've been through and done for each other?" Ethan started to get really mad. "Whose home are you in? Whose food do you eat? Whose family are you hanging on to? Barging in on? If anyone has done anything for anybody, I have been the one that's been there for you. And all of a sudden, you don't care anymore?" "Exactly. It wasn't all you, Sawyer. I helped out in this relationship too. If it wasn't for me, we wouldn't even be together. I've been the one that has carried this relationship, always apologizing and asking for another chance, when a lot of the times it's your fault and your issues that tore us apart. You are the weak link here. You are the one that doesn't care, and the one that keeps drifting through life as if just existing, not feeling anything or talking to anybody. Not me. You are a worthless piece of shit who doesn't deserve what you have and never will deserve it. That's why my mom kicked me out, right? Because I am a worthless piece of shit. At least I have parents that love me. At least I don't pine for something every day I don't have. You're always chasing after me, night and day, messages in my locker, living with me, buying me gifts. Get the memo, Ethan. I didn't even get you anything for Valentine's Day. You are a bitch. A pussy-whipped bitch." Ethan backhanded Sawyer across his hateful face. Sawyer looked at Ethan, as if he had just committed murder. "Oh, we're back to that now. I bet in 3 days you come back and beg me to forgive you." Sawyer stepped closer until he was nose to nose with Ethan. "This is what you are going to do. You are going to get back to my room, pack your things, and get the hell out of my house. You have 20 goddamn minutes. You even hit a second over, you will be thrown out on your ass by the cops. Consider this friendship finished. Don't ever label it a relationship again. It was never you, stupid idiot." Sawyer spun around and marched off in the opposite direction. Ethan seethingly turned around and fumed back to the house to get his things together, praying he got out of there as soon as humanly possible. He threw all of his belongings into the suitcases and started flashbacks of him and Sawyer and how they had been when he first got there. Sawyer had helped him unpack and unload all of his belongings. It took an eternity trying to figure out where to put everything, but Ethan was happy because he'd been doing it with Sawyer. Guilt and conviction was trying to gnaw at his otherwise hardened heart. I'm not apologizing to that ungrateful, horrible brat. If I never see him again, it'll be too soon. Ethan texted his mother, "Mom, I'm coming home. Expect me there in 30 minutes. He doubted his mom would get the text and read it within 30 minutes, but at least the message would be there for when he would unknowingly show up, whether she saw him first or his convertible. Ethan had packed his final bag when he accidentally sideswiped Sawyer in a rush to start packing his convertible. "Sorry." "Ethan, wait. Maybe you shouldn't leave. I was just thinking about our conversation and our argument. I'd like to talk things out like adults. I love you, Ethan. Deep down and solidly love you. Don't go, or at least don't leave us like this. I had a change of heart." "Since when do you have a change of heart about anything, Sawyer? You are always so heartless and downright cruel. It would surprise me if you did actually show some type of compassion for anything other than yourself." Sawyer shifted his weight to one foot. "I am who I am, Ethan. You fell in love with me. Obviously, if I'm all that, then that makes you really stupid, huh?" "Yeah, well, it wouldn't be the first time. All I know is I'm wasted. I have done all I do to appease you, and I am downright tired of it. Everybody hates you. I can see why, too. I kept telling myself you were different, special somehow, but every time I do, I pay for it later. Sawyer, as you're not, and I need to let your sorry ass go. I have plenty of people pining over me, wanting my time, my attention, and I can't keep denying them anymore. You'll have to go back to the same pathetic, lonely life you had before." Sawyer slapped Ethan hard in the face. "You go to hell," he said, inching so close to his face his nose literally touched Ethan's cheek. "I've had more than my share of you and your bullshit. And I'm not pathetic, Ethan. I'm just not you. And to be quite frank, would never want to be." Then Sawyer walked to his door. He reached for the knob and turned it. Jerking the door open, he turned and faced Ethan. "Get the fuck out of my house." Ethan couldn't exit his room fast enough. When Ethan got home and unloaded his Jeep, he didn't even bother unpacking his suitcase after they were all carried to his room. He was just so tired. Sawyer and his drama was getting to be too much for him. He never, in his wildest dreams, thought he'd refuse to accept or forgive one of Sawyer's apologies. Even though Sawyer was right about Ethan being whipped, it still didn't give Sawyer the right to throw it in Ethan's face. It troubled Ethan that Sawyer would be so apathetic, with little empathy for others. He looked through his phone and found Sawyer's contact and deleted it. He erased all of the photos he and Sawyer had taken, all the messages, deleted him from Facebook and Instagram. He did his best to erase all existence of Sawyer. His mom came an hour later after Ethan arrived and saw Ethan's convertible in the driveway. She was ecstatic seeing her son home. She grabbed her groceries and proceeded to the house, almost tripping over the sidewalk in her excitement. She knocked on Ethan's door, but received no answer. When she opened the door and peeked in, she could see why. He was literally dead. He was under the covers, and obviously in a deep sleep. She closed his door and went back to her errands. She found his text later that night and realized his stay was permanent. She was happy about that, but something stirred in her heart. Like maybe something bad had happened for why he was home. She made a mental note to ask him later, to at least see if there was something she could do for him. He woke up late into the night and looked around. His bedroom clock said 3:45 a.m. Ethan was surprised. His phone had several new notifications, one of which was Ethan's mother saying welcome home. Miss Lancelot had also texted asking Ethan why he wasn't home. Apparently Sawyer hadn't bothered to tell her he had moved out. "I made up with my parents," he texted in reply. He knew she'd have peace about that. When he finished his text message, Ethan got up. He decided to go out and drive around a little. The night air was rather chilly. Ethan dressed warmly for the occasion and turned on some music. The wind, despite the chill, felt really good. Ethan allowed his thoughts to roam free. He thought about a lot of different things. The bad thing about the situation was how every thought ended with Sawyer. Eventually, Ethan made it over to the lake he and Sawyer loved so much. Ethan got out of the convertible and made his way to the bridge. When he got there, he couldn't believe his eyes. There before him, Sawyer stood leaning over, looking out at the water. The first thing Ethan did was hold his stomach, as his food tried to come up. It was either his nerves or the fact that he was still angry at Sawyer. Ethan didn't really know if he could talk things out with Sawyer this time. Rolling his eyes, Ethan made his way over. Sawyer immediately noticed and nearly pouted within like a small child. Why, he asked the fates. Ethan wasn't happy, and Sawyer wasn't, however. He got close to Sawyer. All he wanted to do was suddenly take him into his arms. He grabbed Sawyer around his middle and hugged him. Sawyer held onto the railing, as Ethan was not very gentle. Ethan was kissing Sawyer on his neck and going into his clothes. Sawyer just sat there and allowed him. Ethan shedded a few tears, but nothing loud or obnoxious. He just stood there, all over Sawyer, and didn't move. He rested on Sawyer's shoulder, occasionally kissing him. Sawyer just allowed it. When an eternity seemed to pass by, Ethan whispered into Sawyer's ear, his mouth under his lobe, "Sawyer, why do I love you so much?" Sawyer's eyes glistened. "I don't know, Ethan." "I love you, Sawyer." "I love you too, Ethan." "Marry me, then. Marry me and make the happiest man on earth." Sawyer turned. "Yes, Ethan, I'll marry you." Ethan and Sawyer held each other and rocked back and forth in the wind. Ethan woke up from the dream with a huge smile on his face and real tears in his eyes. Once Ethan realized that it was a dream, disappointment rained down upon him. In truth, Ethan could have seen himself marrying Sawyer. Unfortunately, we wouldn't have proposed while in high school. He was too responsible for that. The dream did, however, make Ethan feel a lot better. He woke up ready for a shower and ready to start his day. His sister did send Ethan a text message, but it didn't say welcome home. Instead, she asked if her son was okay. Ethan texted with a quick, "Yeah, I'm fine." Driving to school wasn't any different, except for having to drive from his own house. Ethan's cell phone rang. Checking it, he saw that it was Lane. "Hey," Ethan said. "Hey, Ethan, it's Lane. How are you?" "Buddy, I'm driving at the moment." "Oh, well, I will make this quick then. We're having a party this weekend over at Donald's house. Would you like to come and bring Sawyer?" Ethan had cold chills. Sawyer and I aren't hanging out that much right now. I don't think he'll be coming, but I would be psyched to go. "Awesome. Well, it's at 7:30 Saturday evening. Bring an entree." Ethan smiled. "All right, dude." Ethan couldn't wait to finally do something social without Sawyer's name on it. Ethan walked up to Donald's door with a 6-pack of beer in his hand. He couldn't be drinking any of it, but he got it for the party, knowing everybody would love him for it. Plus, he didn't mind doing it. Donald opened the door and smiled broadly. "Hey, my man." He stepped forward and hugged Ethan, clapping him on the back. "I never see you anymore, dude. You're the second one here. Thanks for the beer, by the way." "Welcome, bro," Ethan said, handing the beer to Donald. Ethan walked through the living room and out to the back. There, Ethan sat down at one of the 20 patio tables near Donald's massive in-ground swimming pool and just relaxed. Donald had a lot of money. His dad was one of the richest businessmen in town. Ethan had been to his house a number of times before he got close to Sawyer. Donald was known for having extravagant, off-the-wall parties. Sometimes over 300 people would show up and infiltrate every room in the house. Donald always had the parties when his parents went out of town for social business events. Donald never told his parents about the parties he held, and always made sure to clean the entire house inch by inch, leaving no evidence a party was held. Ethan always helped in the cleanup because nobody else was sober enough. Donald only drank a little because the parties he had already made him cool. He didn't have to go above and beyond like others did to be accepted. Ethan didn't either, because he was the #1 athlete in school. Ethan went to the punch bowl and got him some punch. He went to the entree table and got him some food. "Ethan, you know the pool is open, if you want to go ahead and get in. A lot of people are going to be in there swimming and doing God knows what here soon," Donald said, taking a brief break from host to see how his friend was doing. "Thanks, buddy," Ethan replied, going back to his food and drink. Donald could tell, and anyone could tell by looking at him, that Ethan had a sort of gait about him. Like the way he carried himself wasn't the normal Ethan. Ethan always walks with a head high and a smile on his face. Lately they noticed he looked tired all the time. Quiet, forlorn even. It was such a big deal that it stopped anyone from doing what they normally did. But every once in a while, a friend or two would stop and stare and wonder. Ethan finished his meal, then went to throw it in the trash. Afterwards, he went to Donald to see how he could help out before the massive crowd got there. Ethan later swam a lap around Donald's pool. The weather was perfect for swimming tonight. A lot of people were in the pool, but gave Ethan enough room to do his thing. Everyone knew Ethan was a dedicated athlete. When he finished, he climbed out and went to find his clothes. The girls looked at him like they wanted to jump his bones. Even a few guys looked. Envy from all over, pining for his friendship too. Ethan was loved like something crazy. He got dressed, then went into Donald's side bathroom he knew, sat in the back of the house. Nobody knew about it but him and Donald. He went back there and just washed up. He was tired and felt dirty. After finishing, he looked in the mirror and checked his reflection. He approved. Going back out, he went to see what he could get himself into that could be fun but harmless. The party ended at 4. Ethan and Donald once again had their work cut out for them. Everybody was either drunk on the floor or already gone. Clothes floated in the pool, beer cans lie all over the place, and cigarette butts would be seen everywhere. I swear it gets worse and worse with each party, Ethan said. Donald just rolled his eyes. I know, I'm going to have to stop having them if they can't do better. I'll start upstairs and work my way down, Ethan declared, and made a hasty retreat. Donald just looked after him as Ethan disappeared. In the house, Ethan went upstairs and started cleaning. He had trash bags and a vacuum cleaner, air freshener and rags with bleach and soap. He just got to work. He and Donald did what they normally do. By the time they finished, it was 9 in the morning. The place looked new. Ethan bade farewell to his friend at 12 and went home. When he got home, he went into his room and went to sleep. Slept till late that night. Ethan sat at the gas station later that night buying himself a soda when he heard it. It sounded like a loud bang. He ran outside and saw lightning had struck a power line. That wasn't the worst of it. The news earlier that day had broadcasted a severe thunderstorm. Ethan paid no attention to it because tornadoes never touched down in his community. But in live color before, Ethan could see a funnel of tornado forming in the distance. What made it so bad was how it was near his house. Plus the clouds were moving and spinning in such a rapid pace. Lightning had caused a fire across the street from the gas station he had just went to. He was now in his car on his way home. It was 4:30 in the morning. It started pouring down, and the wind blew very hard and extremely quickly. Ethan saw a car move from the impact of a huge gust of wind that missed him by inches. Ethan started praying. He was concerned he might wreck before he got home. The cyclone bared down on his hometown like it was nobody's business. Not only that, but it was getting closer and closer to Ethan. When he turned a corner and saw it even closer than he ever dreamed he would, he literally sat there transfixed. Ethan turned his car around and tried to go to the opposite direction, but it was not working. The cyclone was headed straight for him. Trees were being uprooted from the ground, and things were being smashed. Ethan couldn't drive through the turbulence. It was like his car was in D4 or forced into neutral. When he tried to make a left-hand turn onto the highway, the cyclone's true power finally hit home, and Ethan and his car were slung into a ditch. He had to maneuver his car and drive out. Ethan's car was then slung into the other side of the road. A metal railing sat there to keep people off the grass. Ethan's car collided into the metal railing with such impact his airbag deployed. The deployment struck Ethan's face and temporarily knocked him out unconscious. When he woke up, the cyclone was right on top of his car. His car was thrown around and about until it crashed headlong into another vehicle. Ethan was hit in the head a second time, then thrown from his vehicle. The tornado bared its fangs and terrorized the area for 3 more solid hours until it dispatched into vapor. Mr. and Mrs. Fester ran down the corridor of the hospital terrorized, with horrible thoughts and fears of their son. His mom made it to the nurse's station first and waited for an attendee to arrive. When someone came over to help, she sobbed out loud. "My son! Is my son okay?" She looked at her and asked, "Who was your son?" "Ethan Fester. He was the man in the car accident?" The nurse looked at Miss Fester seriously and advised her to sit in the waiting room until the doctor came out. His mom wept into her husband's shoulders. and his dad helped to cart her off to the waiting room. Ethan woke up in a blur. He couldn't remember where he was or what had happened. He saw his mom sitting in front of him with a worried expression on her face. His mom noticed Ethan was beginning to wake up. "Oh, honey, are you okay? How do you feel, sweetheart?" Miss Fester leaned over her son and gently hugged him. "Mom, don't do that. I can't breathe." His mom jerked away from Ethan, hoping to make him more comfortable. Ethan didn't feel any pain. "I feel fine, Mom. What happened to me?" His mom did her best to fill in the blanks for Ethan. He listened and laid there mesmerized. "Wow. What is your last memory, Ethan? Going to the gas station and just getting a soda. The doctor said you were just fine, but you somehow came out of the wreck with nothing more than a simple bump on your head and a few cuts on your face." Ethan raised his eyebrows. "Good. How long am I going to be here?" His mom frowned. "A few more days to make sure all tests come back fine." Ethan nodded, then closed his eyes and went back to sleep. The ride home several days later made Ethan queasy. The doctor had prescribed some medicine to help him adjust with the after effects of the wreck, and part of the medicine prescribed keeps Ethan drowsy and sedated. "Mom, can you please drive slower? If you make me puke, I'm moving back out." His mom just slowed down. When Ethan got home, Miss Fester helped Ethan out of the car and into the house. She helped him into his room and into bed. Ethan looked at the clock, then rolled over on his side and went to sleep. Ethan's convertible had to be replaced. His dad bought Ethan a new one. This one was black and newer. His parents decided to wait until Ethan was feeling better before they told him. Due to the medication, Ethan was very grumpy and didn't feel like doing anything. His doctor told Miss Fester over the phone that it was normal, not to worry about it. Ethan told his parents after several weeks had passed that he did not wish to return to school. At first, both parents put up a huge fight, but Ethan explained he already had enough credits to graduate, and he didn't have to attend any other classes. Furthermore, Duke University had already accepted him, and he wasn't interested in attending any other colleges. Ethan's parents gave in and allowed their son to drop his last 6 classes of the year. His GPA would not be affected. By then, it was early March, and Ethan decided to turn his phone service off, turn his cell phone in. When questioned why, Ethan told his mom he wanted to rest for the rest of the year. Anyone bothering him whatsoever. He told her he was tired of being smothered by everybody at school. He told her that he had made a friend by the name of Sawyer, and had tried having one friend to see if that would potentially give him some space. He said that in the end, however, it only made matters worse. His mother understood and cut his service off the very next day. Ethan continued to stay in bed and to eat healthily and just try to get better. March, April, and May eventually passed. Ethan loved his new car. He drove it everywhere. He went to the beach, to the museum parks, met new people, and made new friends along the way. His parents allowed Ethan freedom to do whatever he wanted until his graduation rolled around in June. Ethan decided to travel and to take a small vacation. Went to Hawaii for a month, stayed with an uncle. He learned how to surf and dance Hawaiian-style dances. He went to New York City and stayed with some family for a month. He enjoyed the city life. He enjoyed plays, bars, family time, and going to Manhattan and walking the Statue of Liberty. When June approached, Ethan returned to attend his graduation. He stepped out of his convertible. He looked around as the wind blew. His face had a dark tan. Wearing sunglasses, Ethan wore a white shirt showing off his six-pack and a pair of black shorts, flip-flops. He walked to the door of the varsity and stepped inside. The store was vacant due to the graduation ceremony scheduled in less than 3 hours. A custodian looked at the door and smiled. Ethan returned her gaze. "Hey," she greeted. "Hey," he replied with a smile. Ethan walked over to the counter. "Where is everybody?" The custodian looked at Ethan. "All of our customers are students from the local high school, and everyone is graduating today." "Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Well, can I possibly order an Angus cheeseburger with fries and a regular Coke?" The custodian lost her smile. She rushed out her pad and pen. "Would you like that with lettuce and tomato, sir?" "Yes, please." The custodian wrote his order down and rung Ethan up. "That will be $10.50. And paid the lady and grabbed his cup and walked over to the drink machine. Ethan thought briefly about his times at the varsity. He could actually see his friends at their regular table now. He smiled a little bit, but not too much. He wouldn't miss it much. He had already moved on in his heart. Couldn't wait for Duke. He actually had a tour scheduled in July to check out the campus. He was extremely excited about it. Ethan took a seat at a different booth from the one he normally sat at and waited for his food to be brought to him. Ethan was nervous about being back in town. He had been afraid to step inside the varsity despite the empty parking lot because you just never know who was there. The custodian came over with a tray and his food. "Let me know if you need anything, okay?" Ethan smiled and said, "Yeah, sure." He began to eat. It had been a long time since he had eaten at the varsity. New York and Hawaii just couldn't make a sandwich like them. He'd missed their food. Ethan got a text from his mother. "Ethan, don't be late for your own graduation. I know you've enjoyed your vacation your dad and I gave you, but don't let it go to your head. Hurry up and get home so we can get you ready and dressed out there on time." Ethan just rolled his eyes. "Mom, I'm already in town. I'm at the varsity getting something to eat because I haven't eaten all day. I'll be home in 20 minutes or so." "Okay," his mother replied, and turned his phone off so he could eat in peace. He took his time because he was just tired. He'd been traveling all night and was almost late getting there. When he finally finished, Ethan got up, met eye contact with the custodian, smiled, and said goodbye. He didn't know this, but because of that smile, he received a new crush that day. The custodian watched him get into his car and drive off, wondering where he was going and if he'd be back. Ethan pulled into his driveway, more nervous now than ever. When he attended his graduation ceremony, he would be seeing everybody again. He just didn't know how he felt about that. A part of him wanted to see everyone again, and a part of him did not. Sitting in his car, looking at the house he had not lived in for over 4 months, literally made Ethan nervous. He spoke to his parents enough. They weren't what made him nervous. Seeing all his friends again made him nervous. He got out of his car, walked up to the door of his parents' house, and went inside. Mom was breaking green beans and putting them in a bowl to be cooked in the kitchen. His dad was in his room getting dressed. Ethan walked into the kitchen, and his mom looked over to see what the noise was. She dropped everything she was doing and went running to her son, embraced him with tears in her eyes. "Oh, Ethan, I missed you so much." Ethan endured her tight embrace and told his mother he missed her too. "Your father is upstairs getting ready for graduation ceremony. He should be down shortly." She hugged her son yet again. "Go on upstairs and get dressed. We barely have an hour." Ethan went upstairs and went into his room. He looked around the room briefly, as if he hadn't been inside in years, then saw a cap and gown laying on his bed in his school colors, blue and black. Ethan went over to the bed and looked at his cap and gown. He couldn't believe it. He was nervous. "God, give me the strength, please." Ethan went into the bathroom to shower and change. When he walked into the living room in his gown, his mom squealed with delight. She popped her husband, who was watching TV, to look at her son. His dad looked over and smiled. Getting off the chair, he looked at his wife and son. "Are we ready to go?" Both of them nodded, and out the door they went. School was a sight to behold for Ethan. He took a deep breath, sitting in the back seat of his parents' family van. "God, I don't want to do this." They made their way to the reserved spot in the parking lot for those that were graduating. When they parked and got out of the car, Ethan looked at his parents and smiled. Leaning against their car, he said, "Mom, Dad, this is it. I'm finally graduating." Mother looked at Ethan. She had tears in her eyes. "This certainly has been an incredible journey with you, Ethan. Not only as your mother, but as your friend too. I don't think any mother here could be more proud of their son than I am." Ethan had to hold back the tears. "Mom, thank you for saying that. I will never forget the things you taught me and everything that you've done for me. I will carry it in my heart for the rest of my life." His mother cried, grabbing tissue reserved for the graduation walk. There may not be any left by the time he makes it, she thought. Arm in arm, Ethan and his parents walked over to where they were holding the ceremony. It was chaotic. There were over 100 people present. 500 of those people were students from his own school, and 2 others in the same county. The other 500 were family and friends. Ethan met his principal and found out where his seat was. He went over and found it, sat down before anyone could recognize him. It wasn't until everything settled down that Ethan was recognized by his first friend. Lance was just standing there, looking around. He spotted Ethan just looking at him. He waved and smiled from ear to ear. Ethan smiled back, then went to looking around for the others. Because students from other schools were graduating, Ethan did not find his friends so easily. He didn't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing. Finally, everyone was called to sit and behave so the ceremony could begin. There were over 25 faculty members that took the podium and made speeches. It dragged by endlessly to Ethan, whose butt was getting numb. Then something remarkable happened. Something Ethan hadn't expected. The valedictorian was called to make their speech. Would Sawyer Lancelot please step up to the podium to deliver his school's final address representing the students of Fort Fate High? Everyone clapped but Ethan. Ethan watched as Sawyer made his way up to the podium to deliver his valedictorian speech. My name is Sawyer Lancelot. A lot of people would believe I wasn't capable of something like becoming valedictorian. I was one of the quietest kids in our school, and one of the most despised. I haven't changed. I'm still the same mean kid that roamed your halls several weeks ago during final exams. But, and this is the kicker, though I am mean, I still believe in myself. During this speech, I truly wanted to say something that people could take with them for years to come. If there was something I could say, it would be this. Never stop believing in yourself. If rain pours hard on your head, or the wind tries to blow you away and tells you you're not good enough, don't believe it. Just don't believe it. Had I believed I wasn't good enough just because I was different and nobody understood me, just because people told me that I wasn't, I wouldn't be up here now. Never give up. Never stop believing in yourself. You are unique and you are special. Never forget that. He went on to thank the school faculty and declared the appropriate statements valedictorians are required to declare finalizing their speech. Then he stepped down from the podium. It was a very good speech. It may not have made everybody cry, but it was a very good speech. Everybody clapped. Ethan clapped too. Sawyer looked different, more grown up. He looked as though he were ready to move on from high school and conquer the world. Ethan smiled to himself upon seeing Sawyer yet again. He didn't expect he was going to anytime soon, and was more than shocked to learn Sawyer had made it to the #1 spot on the academics list. Soon, students were awarded for personal achievements and given plaques and certificates. Ethan died when he was called up 7 times for 7 trophies, winning first place in several major competitions. His whole school was shocked to see him at last. He was asked to give a short speech. Honestly, he said, feeling awkward, I didn't do anything special to receive all of this. I love sports and competing. I worked out every day of my life for 10 solid years. I paced myself unfairly sometimes and went way too hard at times. It's not something I recommend for anyone to do, but I would like to say hello to all my friends and to tell each other and every one of them that I love them. Ethan was struck with a sob suddenly. Tears started falling, and to let them know that I missed them and thought about them every day that I was gone. As you may or may not know, I was in a car accident in early March when our tornado hit, and it totaled my car. Quite honestly, it was a miracle that I survived. My parents allowed me to take a break from it all shortly afterwards. I went traveling to New York and Hawaii. I got a tan, and I got to relax for the first time in my life. None of you, however, were ever far from my heart. When Ethan finished, everyone stood up and applauded him. Even the students from the other schools stood up and cried. Ethan had a heart of gold, and everybody cried over that beautiful speech. Even Sawyer, whom of which remembered Ethan's tears so well, got choked up listening. Ethan truly was special, truly and surely. He went and sat back down. Ethan could feel everyone's eyes on him, shifting uncomfortably in his chair. He decided to make do. It was only one more day before he moved to a bigger and brighter tomorrow. Ethan hung out with his friends one more time. They all went to the varsity and kicked back. A lot of people asked Ethan where he had been and what he had been up to. He was the center of attention. Ethan did his best to keep a good attitude and loved everybody equally the way he used to. In fact, they had too much fun because the day ended way too soon. Eventually the varsity emptied and Ethan was the only one left, sitting there all alone. The custodian from earlier watched him and continued to clean up the restaurant. The place would be closed in several minutes. It stayed open until midnight. Around 11:59, the varsity had a final customer. Ethan looked up from his coffee and watched Sawyer walk into the store and to the counter. He didn't even look Ethan's way. Ethan's heart quickened. Sawyer ordered his food to go, then looked up in Ethan's general direction. When he saw Ethan, he pretended not to have seen him and kept on standing there, quietly and to himself. Ethan looked at him for a moment, then dismissed the whole thing. He was too tired of Sawyer and would no longer afford the drama. When the custodian gave Sawyer his food, Sawyer turned around and made a hasty retreat. Ethan watched Sawyer drive his Jeep away from the varsity. Ethan knew he'd always be grateful to Sawyer. He no longer loved him, but knew he'd always be grateful for the things he did for and gave to him. Ethan watched over Sawyer turn the final left at the light before he passed completely from view. Ethan soon left as well and went home to rest. He'd be leaving for college in 2 months, and he needed to get ready for that. High school was over. Onward we go, Ethan thought. Only saying goodbye to the past that he no longer needed in his presence. Goodbye to what was. Hello to what will be. Sounded like a good idea to Ethan. Two years later. I hate North Carolina. It is always wet and cloudy here. There are mountains and trees all over the place. It's like I stepped into Dolly Parton's world, and the only thing missing is her famous song from back in the day called Coat of Many Colors. Duke University was a great school. I loved it there. The buildings were very old, had a religious kind of feel to it, and they were huge. The campus had manicured grass, trees that were well kept. Despite not liking North Carolina, I loved my school. The faculty there was very old, set in their ways, and had lived and taught at the university for several decades. When I first arrived, I had no idea what I was doing. I couldn't find my way around anywhere, and nobody knew me. I wasn't popular anymore, and it made things difficult. It was difficult because people don't talk to other people that they don't know. All in all, though, I managed to find my dorm room all right, and in one piece. I met my roommate. His name was Daniel. Daniel was sleeping in the bed the first day I walked in with my suitcases. I set my things where there was room. It kind of went from there. He never complained about where I placed my belongings, and I never moved them once they were placed. He was a blonde-haired guy with blue eyes and wore a midnight shadow. That's how I knew I wasn't in Kansas anymore. Nobody wore midnight shadows in high school. Daniel's hair was long and nearly went to his shoulders. It was almost cut in layers. His bangs went down to his eyes. He never spoke unless spoken to, and he wore tight clothes. They seemed vintage or older clothing. Either way, he was very easy to live with. We did not speak our first day, and I wasn't really in any hurry to make any kind of college debut. I went to meet my soccer coach, track coach, and my football coach all on different days. Immediately, my name began to spread around the dorms. Even though I was a freshman, I was already spoken about and known. The first girl to ask me out was a girl named Rachel. She had shoulder-length bleach blonde hair, blue eyes, and freckles. She was actually very pretty. Unfortunately, being gay, I could not very well oblige. When I turned her down, she looked hurt. I immediately felt bad, but my resolve remained. It looked as though high school would be repeating itself yet again. I would once again become the big man on campus. I didn't know how I felt about that, but I decided to be patient and allow time to dictate that to me myself. So I did. I began my practices and depended on my track scholarship for everything, including for the cost of books. It worked. I worked part-time for my coaches, helping out with the setup for practice the following day. I attended weekly cleanup sessions in the gyms, and I ran errands as well. Paid well. I was able to go out and eat every day versus cook. Some of the time I ran into people I knew, and other times I did not. It depends on the day and the time. Academically, I chose business as my major. I started my courses and made straight A's. I had to get used to the professors at the university. They were professionals in their field, but they also had no sense of humor or people skills. I found myself struggling to communicate with them whenever it was necessary. Fortunately, a number of students had this problem. I wasn't the only one. I had to set up study groups with other students so I could stay on top of my grades. It was rather fun. We gathered in each other's dorms twice a week. Went over all kinds of things. Daniel usually slept whenever I had study groups in my room. That, or he would leave and find something else to do. I asked him one particular day if he had made any friends on campus, and he said that he had. his progress was just much slower than mine. I can understand that. I had my athlete helping me. Loved winners, especially winners in sports. I excelled because I was always working out. I never failed to do something athletic every day. Personified who I was. Couldn't help it. It came as naturally to me as breathing. Just like sleeping came naturally for Daniel. I made him swing by Steve's Pizza with me one day, and we got bombarded by people who knew me. Daniel was amazed at all the people that hung around me. I just went through the motions until I started to see Daniel struggling to socialize. I understood. These weren't his friends. I pulled him and myself from the crowd, and we got food and left to go back to our dorm. He thanked me for being considerate of his feelings. I accepted his thanks and explained to him that I knew someone in high school that resembled him a little bit. A loner too, and my best friend, so I understood what you were going through a few minutes ago. His name was Sawyer. He actually became valedictorian of my high school. Daniel listened with sincere interest and told me he could see it. You have a very big, consoling side of you, Ethan. No wonder everybody likes you. Well, I try, I replied. It was that particular day that Daniel and I finally became friends. With him, it had been a very slow process. I was happy he finally started to come around. My mom and dad came down to visit me, and they met a lot of my friends. Mom was amazed I had already started fitting in the way that I had, and asked me what I had on me. I told her I casted a love spell in the air and made everybody love me. She laughed hard over the joke. She cried when it came for her to leave. She told me that she missed me, and I told her that I missed her. She made me feel very uncomfortable, as her fits always do. But that's Mom. I shook my dad's hand and told him to be careful going home. They decided to visit me 3 times out of the year, and I was more than happy to allow it. I asked my parents if they'd seen any of my friends from high school, but they had no news about any of them. It was probably all for the best. I had moved on with my life. I hadn't even checked up on them through social media. I was that busy and tired. In June, I had completed my first year of college. It had gone by filled with amazing things. I had a summer break that lasted 2 months. I went home for it. Being back in our own community after 9 months was so surreal. My phone rung off the hook from my buddies at Duke, and I spent a lot of time socializing and talking with them. I saw a few of my friends from high school working odd jobs around town. One at a clothing store, one at a gas station, several at restaurants. But when I traveled over to the local community college, I literally saw all of my friends there. They swarmed me with questions and love. We hung out at one of the parks in the community and spent the day talking and catching each other up on our lives. There must have been 50 people around. When I went home that night, I was so exhausted, I fainted on the bed the moment I hit my face on the pillow. I didn't even bother reading them all. I checked my cell inside a nearby dresser, and I went to sleep. I didn't wake up until dinner. The next day, my mom thought my problems were just funny. I wish I had people swarming all over me. No, Mom, you really don't, I said back. I decided to go to the library to get away from everybody later that evening. I had eaten a lasagna, and I was full, and in a very somber mood. When I walked in, as luck and fate would have it, I collided into somebody carrying 6 books in their arms. The person in question dropped the books. His books hit the carpet floor. One even landed on my foot. The person holding the books went to cussing me out and yelling. I was just ready to box his face. Recognition met my eyes and my heart. There, standing in front of me, was Sawyer. Heat instantly went to my cheeks, and all of a sudden, I couldn't breathe. Sawyer had something over me I could not explain. When he realized it was me, he bent down and went back to picking up his books. I bent down and grabbed the one that landed on my foot, and I placed it on the very top. He looked at me. "Thanks," he said, then moved on out the exit doors of the library. That made me mad. How dare he just act like we didn't have a history? We did that at the varsity on graduation day, and it had infuriated me so much I could have slapped him. I didn't realize I was marching out of the library after him until it was too late. By the time I got out there, to him, he was already at his Jeep, placing his books in the passenger seat. "What did I do to you, Sawyer?" Folding my arms over my chest, Sawyer just jumped suddenly, as though I scared him or something. He turned around and faced me. What are you talking about? Quit acting dumb. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Sawyer turned red with fury. My life always flashed before my eyes when I saw him do that. He got in my face. You backhanded me in the face the day you left my house. That's what you did to me. I told you I didn't do drama, and I told you you only had one more chance with me. Obviously, you are still just as dense now as you were before. Sawyer jerked himself away from me and sped around his Jeep to get to his driver's side door. I hurried behind him and grabbed his arm. I'm sorry I did that, okay? I'm sorry. He spun around. Why did you do it then? Panic just hit me. Sawyer, I don't know. I was angry, okay? I was just angry and in love and helpless. I felt pain inching close to my heart. I still am helpless around you. I can't help it. You do something to me. I do something to you? You haven't even spoken to me in a year. Tears could be seen in his eyes. My heart began to ache. Do that to me, Sawyer. Don't. I was going through a lot, man. Dry your damn eyes already. Sawyer just looked on. Yeah, they're dry, Ethan. Have been for a very long time. Sawyer rushed for his door handle. I couldn't stop myself from flinging my body into him and pushing him away from getting into that Jeep. Talk to me. Tell me what's in your heart. I see your tears. Tear yourself away from me again. Talk to me. I've been waiting on it. I waited at the varsity for you to talk to me. I was at home for a month or two after I left your home, waiting on you to come over. You could have come over and spoken to me. You never did any of that, Sawyer. I was tired of chasing you. I don't have the strength anymore. I'm sorry. Ethan, Sawyer said, trying to calm down. He had his face buried in his hands. You started that fight. You called me a bastard for a very minor reason. You can't just go around calling people names just because you get your feelings hurt by them. You damage, no, you ruin relationships that way. I was owed an apology, waiting for it. I deserved one, and it never came. So you were no longer worth my time. I listened and weighed Sawyer's words. Yeah, I'm always the perpetrator, aren't I, Sawyer? You never do anything wrong. Sawyer charged and pushed me away from his Jeep. Bye, Ethan. Sawyer fumbled with his keys as he climbed into his Jeep and cranked it. He was visibly shaken. I knew it was from rage. Giving up, I let him leave. I was tired anyways. Literally, I could hardly breathe. Sawyer never ceased to exhaust me to my limits. I went back to my car and decided to skip going back inside the library. I couldn't get Sawyer out of my mind. I waited for you to apologize, but you never did. His words reverberated in my ear. Sawyer was waiting on me the entire time to apologize, to come back to him. I seriously had no idea Sawyer still cared about me. I thought that he hated me. Plus, after my car accident with the tornado, I didn't really know what I needed to do regarding him. A precipice in my life. High school to college. Plus, I was tired. I was sick for several weeks. My parents allowed me to take a vacation, and I sort of forgot about everyone. I was tired of my problems and people altogether. That included Sawyer and his issues. I didn't know if I still loved Sawyer. I hadn't really entertained the possibility of him and I getting back together in my mind. I'd refused to. Didn't think it was a good idea. However, his revelation to me, informing me he had waited for me, pushed me into believing Sawyer still loved me. I always wound up helpless around him, always being enslaved by my emotions whenever I was around him. I found myself feeling the same way now. Did that mean I still loved him? I don't know. Back to my house. I got out of the car and went inside. In my room, I laid down on the bed and once again thought of my exchange with Sawyer. And I questioned myself, wondering if I had still feelings for him, wondering if I should take it as a sign, bumping into him again. And if so, should I pay him another visit and talk to him about what happened? Talk to him about it, and maybe see if there was any unfinished business left behind us. I scheduled the event for Friday of that same week. I had a few things to do regarding errands and such. Plus, I was given a little homework to complete over the summer regarding my major. I wanted to get started on that, so it left me no other choice but to schedule things with Sawyer towards the end of the week. I tried very hard to focus on my studies and my errands. I was helping Mom out around the house, and Dad and I were doing stuff too. Sawyer, however, kept creeping into my mind when I least expected it, and it made it hard for me to focus. "Sweetie, what's wrong?" my mom asked me while we were at the store Thursday evening. Heart racing, I replied. "What do you mean?" Mom went back to looking at the shelves. "I don't know. You just look sad. You look like you have something on your mind, and it doesn't compliment your usually nonchalant, happy-go-lucky demeanor." I always laughed. Funny way of putting that. "Well," Mom squeaked, "you usually are a light side of sunshine. You're always smiling and have a good attitude. It's not usual for your lips not to have a smile on them." I sighed and took a deep breath. "Oh, Mom, I'm fine. I didn't get a lot of sleep last night. That's all. I may turn in early tonight so that I can." "Well, when we are through here, you're going home, and you're going to get some rest." I laughed. "Okay, Mom." On my bed minutes later, I laid my head on my pillow and envisioned Sawyer's face. Did I really still love him? I pictured him smiling, studying, and being his usual serious self. I caught myself smiling, decided that tomorrow I would be honest with myself about him, and try to be honest with him as well. Sleep took me shortly afterwards. Driving to his house the next day around noon wasn't easy for me to do. I found myself feeling nauseous and nervous. I didn't text him to inform him I was on my way, for if I had, I feared he would stop me from coming over. Sawyer was a sour root. He had to be poked and prodded into doing things. Finishing this business of love and friendship wasn't something he'd do willingly towards. After all, he was my best friend, and I did know him a little. I knew what I had to do. When I pulled up onto his street, I had to pull into his long driveway that went back 20 acres. It was a chore, but it also brought back memories. Memories that were precious to me. I knew I was always grateful for what Sawyer did for me, but I just never knew what. As I drove down the driveway, I relieved a few of those memories. I caught myself smiling again. I guess that's just how I was. Everyone said that I loved to smile. More and more I'm starting to see it for myself. When I got back to the house, I spotted Sawyer's Jeep near the garage. I stopped my convertible and put it in park. I turned the car off and just stared at his Jeep, taking a deep breath. I got out of the car and went to the front door and rang the doorbell. Mrs. Lancelot answered the door. When she saw me, she screamed, "Oh my God, Ethan!" She rushed forward and pushed me in a bear hug. "Oh my God, I missed you so much." We sort of rocked back and forth for a moment. Then she pulled back to get a good look at me. "Wow, oh my God, you look so good. What do I owe the honor of your visit?" I looked at Miss Lancelot and smiled. "Oh, it's nothing," I said, making it sound unimportant. "I'm just here to see Sawyer. I saw him yesterday at the library, and I just thought I would come over and catch up with him." We spoke, but we didn't have much time to really talk. "Okay," Mrs. Lancelot cheerfully admonished. "Sawyer's just being lazy today and hanging around the house." She motioned for me to come inside, and I followed, took a brief look around. The house looked a little different from the time that I lived there. Lancelot had moved things around. She looked at me and told me to go to Sawyer's room, that he was in there. I nodded, waved bye to her, and then I walked to Sawyer's bedroom and stood there for a moment. My hands were sweaty, and I was a nervous wreck. I really felt like turning around and running away. Finally, I mustered up the courage to knock on Sawyer's door. I just tapped on it. Moments later, I heard, "Come in." I slowly opened the door and stuck my head through the doorway. When I peered through, I saw Sawyer sitting on the floor. He looked up suddenly from playing a video game and instantly went pale upon seeing me. Looking away, he said, "Ethan, what are you doing here?" I walked into the room with my heart beating 90 miles an hour, and I looked at Sawyer. "To talk to you." Sawyer went back to his video game, looking serious. I had a brief chance to take a deep breath. After a moment, he paused his game, put down his controller, and looked at me. He was sitting on the floor. He leaned back on his hands and turned to me. "Well?" That was my cue to move. I stumbled forward and made my own seat on the floor beside him. I did it effortlessly, and Sawyer gave me a brief awe-inspiring look before covering it up. "So what's up, Ethan? You saw me at the library and we talked, but apparently you have more to say." "Yes," I replied, taking my time to think. "Okay, I'm all ears." "About the past. I didn't come and see you and apologize back then because I had a car accident shortly after. I was sick for several weeks and afterwards. Afterwards, I asked my parents if I could take a break from school and travel abroad to come see family. They told me that I could. I went back to New York and I went to Hawaii. Okay, and I had my cell phone cut off and I gave it back to my mom for several months. I didn't want to be bothered by the world anymore. So you were gone and you cut yourself off from everyone and everything at home. That makes sense. Yes, I came back on the day of our graduation ceremony. After the ceremony ended, I hung out with my friends until 11:30 at the varsity. Everyone went home, but I stayed until midnight. I was about to leave when I saw you come in at the last minute. I didn't really know what to say to you. I thought you would have come to me. You thought what? I thought you would have came to me. I looked at you and waited for you to come over. Yeah, I remember. I looked at you too, thinking you would have came to me. Yes, you did. And? Well, that's why I never called or apologized after I left your house. That's why I never came to you or approached you at the varsity. I was dealing with a lot and needed space. I'm sorry. That's it? Yeah, that's it. And I'm sorry. I'm apologizing for it now. I went to college a month later thinking you didn't love me anymore. I told myself I had to move on. Sawyer looked at me. My heart was pounding. You said you started college. Do you like Duke? A lot. I've made a lot of friends, and I fit in beautifully. How are your grades? All A's. That's good. I scooted closer to Sawyer. What about you? Any relationships or anything? Yet. What about you? Nothing. I haven't had time, to be honest. I haven't had much time myself. I raised my hand and placed it on Sawyer's arm. Oh my God. Tears started to pour. Why now? In front of him. I took one look into his eyes and immediately released more. I was so embarrassed and so over it. Ethan, Sawyer said, almost handedly. He never pulled away from my touch. I couldn't draw the strength to pull away. My face was red, and I was a hot mess. Sawyer just did that to me. I never stopped loving you, Sawyer. He just looked at me. I caressed his arm with my fingers. He never pulled away. I pulled back, releasing my touch. After a moment, I looked at Sawyer. Sawyer, can we meet again? Draw this conversation to a close and meet again sometime next week. Sawyer just looked at me. Yes, we can. But Ethan, don't expect things to go back to the way that they were. You and I are on opposite ends of the country now for school. It wouldn't work in a million years. I looked at Sawyer. I had to fight his disappointing words. Sawyer, I'm not asking you to marry me. I'm just asking if I can see you again. Sawyer looked at me for a moment. Yes, Ethan, we can meet next week. I smiled, feeling hopeful. Good, I just can't wait. I climbed up onto my feet and looked at Sawyer. We made eye contact, and I smiled. I held his gaze a tad bit longer than normal, and then I turned around and left, mouthing bye with my lips slightly for Sawyer to see. Sawyer waved back to me bye. The drive home was a quiet one. I felt so different. I couldn't really explain it. It was unlike anything that I'd ever felt before. Was it peace, or was it hope? Did I want Sawyer and I to get back together? Mom taught me to believe in fate, destiny, and miracles, and I didn't know if it was mere coincidence or not that Sawyer and I bumped into each other at the library. One thing was for sure. I didn't think about Sawyer that much at Duke. Now he was creeping into my mind every other hour like he used to in high school. Something had to give. I knew I was sure as hell couldn't go to Duke like this at the end of the summer. No way, no how. I had to find some answers. I jogged around the neighborhood the next morning, pacing myself extra fast. I felt good whenever I did that. Plus, it helped me think positively about things, especially if a thought creeped in my mind while I was working out. I had to work on a few assignments for my upcoming classes next quarter. I found my way back to the library to start when I find Sawyer back there as well. He was at the front desk, returning his books. I knew he didn't read all that in just 1 week. I walked past him. He saw me right as I was about to respect his space and leave him be. He and I made eye contact, and I stopped what I was doing. He smiled an empty smile. I went over as he finished up. He just looked at me. What's up? Nothing. I'm preparing for an upcoming class. I have a few things to get done. I tried doing it last time, but I bumped into you and stuff. Yeah, I had the same problem. I should have finished those books much sooner than I did. I hope I wasn't the distraction. Sawyer responded, I'm not sure that you weren't. Romance back into my life isn't exactly what I need right now. My heart broke. Not even a little, I joked. Sawyer looked at me with a questioning look, but he never said anything. It felt awkward with the silence, so I broke it. Well, anyways, I'll let you go. I need to be serious about my assignments this time. But you have my number. Want to chat? Just hit me up. For you, I'm available. Sawyer smiled. Okay, take care. I nodded and said the same. Sawyer left the library, and I went to the computer to start on some reading. It went by uneventful, and I managed to finish everything I needed to do for that day rather quickly. I packed my book bag and left. When I got home, I thought about Sawyer and when he and I are supposed to meet next. It was then I realized I hadn't scheduled a time. I got my cell phone and texted him, When would you like to meet? I sent the text, and then I decided to get some sleep. Sawyer called me later that night. Hello, I said groggingly. Hey, Ethan, it's Sawyer. I was so dazed, I thought I was dreaming for a second. Who? It's Sawyer, Ethan. I clumsily looked at the clock on my cell. 10 at night. What's up, Sawyer? I asked. I was calling to see if you wanted to come over to our bridge and talk there. You said you wanted to meet again, right? I did, I replied. Okay, well, I'm over here. Okay, give me about 20 minutes. All right, take your time. I plan not to be here for a minute or two. Okay, bye. After I hung up, I got up and dressed. I knew Sawyer and I were going to meet again, but I was a bit taken aback that it was happening so soon. I got dressed and ran out the door. I got into my convertible and cranked to the car. Out on the road, I tried to steel my nerves. This would be the third meeting I would have with him, and I had no idea how things would turn out. I made it to the bridge in 30 minutes. I pulled up and got out, looked around. Sawyer was never in the spot when he went there. Sometimes he would stand by the end of the bridge. Other times he hardly walked out. I caught a glimpse of him in the middle, looking out over the water, looking like he was lost in thought. I folded my hands into my pockets and slowly walked onto the bridge. Sawyer looked my way shortly before I made it by his side. When he saw me, he returned his gaze to the water. I stood beside him and looked out over the water, too. It was nice out, cool with hardly a breeze. He didn't say anything at first. Finally, though, he did. Make it out here all right? Yeah, the drive was just fine. Still trying to wake up, though, I laughed. Sawyer smiled. Yeah, I have no idea when you were asleep. I would have hit you up some other time if I had known. I shrugged. It's not a big deal, Sawyer. I wanted the meeting. It didn't really matter when it was supposed to happen. Sawyer didn't respond. He just looked out at the water. He had on a leather jacket and some nice pants. His hair was combed and gelled down. He looked really nice. So what did you have in mind meeting up again, Ethan? Put on the spot, I nervously responded. Well, to talk, to catch up, to see you again. Ethan, you sound like a robot. How about telling me the truth? Just relax and talk normally to me. Nothing has ever stopped you before. I can tell you're guarded and acting closed off. I'm just nervous, Sawyer. He looked at me. Why? You weren't nervous at the library. You weren't nervous showing up at my house. Well, I'm a mess. Why? I don't know why. Feelings for you have resurfaced, and I've been caught by surprise over it. Ethan, it'd never work. We aren't in high school anymore, and we don't live across town from each other like we used to. And we don't go to the same school anymore either. Our paths would never cross like before. Why are you even talking like that? It isn't like I've asked you back out or anything. But you are. You keep asking me for meetings, or coming to my house when I'm not expecting it. I'm not interested anymore. The ship has sailed. Why? I snapped, getting angry at him. Because I'm a realist, that's why. I know when something isn't meant to be. Yeah, you always were the brain, right? But the funny thing about brains, Sawyer, is they think they know everything. Sawyer just rolled his eyes and looked at him. No, Ethan. You just always start fuming and crying whenever you don't get your way. You are a spoiled brat that needs to come down from the highest peg on the ladder. That makes two of us. I was so tempted to leave, I nearly turned around. But I tried to hang in there for a moment longer. I reached over and placed both of my hands on Sawyer's shoulders. Sawyer, we're both adults. We can do anything we set our minds to. I really need you in my life. You're what's missing. I still love you. Can you at least see if it's possible? Sawyer shrugged me off and looked at me as if I were crazy. Afterwards, he looked out over the water again. The breeze began to pick up. I stood there, speechless. Sawyer never shrugged me off. If there was one thing I always had with him, it was the ability to be able to touch him whenever I needed to. Now it was like I was with a different person. I didn't ask for this. I never expected to bump into you again. I keep thinking it's more than mere coincidence, but I can't force you to try, Sawyer. Sawyer looked at Ethan. I'm not interested anymore, Ethan. His words heavily hit my heart. I didn't have any choice but to accept it. Some way, somehow. All right, then. I guess I said all there is to say then. That was basically the reason I requested another meeting. I wanted to see if life had anything else to offer us. But at this point, it looks like it. I'm sorry, Ethan. I'm an honest and blunt man. I can't change my colors any more than you can. That's fine, Sawyer. I did this for me. I owed it to myself to find out. Now that I have the answer, I think everything is good here. Well, focus on your studies for the remainder of your summer. Get everything done and go back to Duke and kick some ass. Become successful, grow, and thrive. Yeah, thanks. I turned around and started walking back towards my car. I said bye in midair and then looked back to see why Sawyer hadn't responded. Sawyer had his face buried against the railing, crying. It broke my heart. Part of me wanted to run back and throw my arms around him. However, I couldn't even breathe over his hard rejection. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't see through my own tears. And nearly couldn't focus on anything I was doing. I turned around and left, hoping for the best for Sawyer. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.